right. Name is Ben Burgess. This is Give Them an Argument. So this is a little bit different from what we usually do on Wednesday nights because at 8 o'clock, so in about half an hour, I'm going to be debating libertarian philosophy professor Michael Huemer on whether taxation is theft. Before that, could be talking to Forrest a little bit, maybe answering some super chat questions if they come up. But first, we really wanted to squeeze this in before waiting for very much longer, since it seemed good to give her the exposure to get the word out about this initiative. I'm joined by Brianna Westbrook from Downballot Progress. Hi, Brianna.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me as a guest today. I'm honored to be here on this podcast with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So tell people about Downballot Progress. What is this?
Well, Downballot Progress is a nonprofit organization aimed at building a volunteer base to pass progressive legislation within state legislatures across the country. While also we're focused on building the infrastructure for progressives to win at the state level, not just in 2021 and 2022, but for years to come.
That is fantastic. I had to let my cat out, but yeah, no, this is really good. You want to talk a little bit about why this is such an important thing to focus on the state legislature level?
Well, it's huge because state legislatures introduce 23 times the number of bills than the United States Congress. Total on average, right around about 120,000 bills a year, which is much more productive than the United States Congress. Right now, the GOP controls, as of May 1st, right around 55% of all state legislatures. So it's an area where we really need to have collective energy and focus on electing progressives in a very coordinated manner to elect more people that support progressive policies like taxing the rich, Green New Deals, free public college and trade schools, a living wage. I know it sounds pretty radical. Universal health care. So it's going to fill a huge void because there's really no organization working in this space specifically to provide that infrastructure to build out progressive power at the state level.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So what do you guys have planned specifically? This is like about to launch, right?
Yeah, it's about to launch. We have a big webinar on Sunday at 7:30 Eastern. We're going to have State Senator Jabari Brisport, House Representative Athena Salmon from Arizona, and a bunch of other really great guests that we're going to be speaking about the importance of participating and organizing to win state legislatures. Because like I said, we have to focus our energy like the Koch brothers did for a long time. And that's how they got in the position that they're in now. We also know that state houses are where most of our members of Congress actually come from. So it's very important that we elect people that match our ideals and also envision that we can create a better world if we're willing to have the courage to fight for policies that radically transform our lives.
Yeah. Speaking of fighting for a better world, I love the old wobbly artwork behind you.
Thank you. Yes, big union supporter. Yeah, and that's what we want to do too is I don't know where we're going to be at with the PRO Act, but repeal right to work laws in states. Speaking of unions, that's something that needs to come back.
Incredibly important. That's where all those got passed. So yeah, that's really, really good. Where can people go to find out more about this?
You can find out more at downballotprogress.com. Our whole platform's on there as well as a link to donate. And that's one thing that I want to ask all your viewers, if you can pitch in just a couple dollars. This is a grassroots funded organization, no millionaires or billionaires. It's funded by working class people from all across the United States. And it's critical that we fund this type of work because if we want to win, we need the infrastructure. Down the pipeline too, we're going to be perhaps having an annual summit train people to be on campaign staff. But we know that, that's an area too that we need to focus on, is putting good people in positions on campaigns to help candidates, because it's not just about the candidate. We got to make sure that we have the staff to help direct the candidate and navigate us to election day.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So I think you might have already given this, but is there a URL or something that people can go to? Just because if I wasn't quite sure if I caught one or not, I'm sure other people aren't too.
Downballotprogress.com.
Downballotprogress.com.
Yep. And on there, you'll have the link to donate. And you also have a link at the top of the page to our upcoming events. We're currently phone banking for our candidate that we endorse in Virginia. You can learn a little bit about that individual. And you can also RSVP for our big Sunday event. If you want to have a larger conversation about Down Ballot Progress, learn a little bit more, I advise you to RSVP for that event. Show up, hear from some really great speakers. It'll be a really enjoyable evening. I promise you all. Your viewers will love it.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Brianna.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. That was Brianna Westbrook from Down Ballot Progress, downballotprogress.com. You should check them out. You should check out the Sunday launch that they're doing. This is an area where, people, the left, meaning not, liberals, but like, the Bernie into the left of that left is hopelessly weak, and we need to do better. So this is absolutely something that we need to work on, and I'm always happy to talk to people like Brianna and help use this as a platform to help them get the word out. So if you're involved in anything like this and you want to do that, drop me a line. So just for the record. All right. So now joined, as always, by our producer, Forrest. So we've got going to be turning over the stream to him in about 15-ish minutes, so I can go over to Modern Debate to debate Michael Huemer, and he'll keep the home fires warm here, and then I'll come back for a few minutes at the end for post-game analysis. How are you doing today, Forrest?
I'm doing all right. It's been a bit stressful. I've been running around since 1 o'clock. But besides that, it's been a pretty good day. Just booked
for the record, he's not running around frantically trying to do stuff for GTAA. This is
no. I was I had to take my cat to the vet, and I had to do it by a taxi today. So I did that, and then I had to go to that dentist appointment, and then I don't know. It's been a day of running around.
Fair enough. So yeah, Michael. Michael Huemer mentioned he's a libertarian. He's a philosophy professor. He's somebody who has I know there's a book, an anthology of readings that I've used as a textbook for introductory ethics classes before that has an article by him in it. I think it's just called, America's Unjust War on Drugs, which is of course an area that I agree with him about. But originally, the people at Modern Debate were saying, brought up the idea of debating him on gun control, which I have absolutely no interest in doing.
I don't think that's something that the left should really engage in any capacity. I think that's the liberals' biggest losing proposition.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I went on the Vanguard YouTube channel once when they invited me to talk about it, but that was a sort of intra-left discussion, and everything I said about it was very much framed in terms of, look, I don't really think this is something we should emphasize, but sure, if we're going to talk about it, here are some thoughts.
Yeah, but I think that's the only way that you really should do it. I think doing it, intra-left is good because it's not really at that point a culture war issue. It's it's just a personal policy preference issue, which really is what it is. And the fact that, liberals and conservatives have turned it into a culture war issue shows that, it's not something that they're ever going to solve in any capacity, like solve, quote unquote, like the point of it is to just keep the conversation going indefinitely and stake out a position, which, the classic liberal line is like, you never actually stake out a position to the other side of the conservative position, but like at least staking out a position that,
yeah, well, what the liberal position is that we should have something called common sense gun reform, which is a nice phrase because it doesn't really mean anything. Like that just means that like we should have some gun laws. Which ones? I don't know. The reasonable ones, those ones, right?
Yeah. And then depending on which liberal it is, I think they have different ideas about what should be banned or what kinds of ammo people can have. Like just the whole plethora, I guess, of possible policy positions on it. But then you have someone like Beto O'Rourke who literally goes, I'm going to confiscate your guns. And conservatives freak out to the point where like, it's a losing proposition in terms of, I think, like it's a losing proposition in terms of policy because it's not a policy that's ever going to be implemented in any, capacity.
No, exactly. Like,
but it's also losing in terms of like messaging. Like it's losing on both.
No, well, it's definitely lose in terms of messaging. You say, "Oh, I'm going to come take your guns," but like also, like part of the problem is that when they use that vague phrase, "common sense gun reform," like a lot of times, like I don't know. I mean, most of the things they're talking about are fine. Some of them aren't. Like I think that like the idea that was like a big deal. I remember a few years ago, Democrats advocating no fly, no buy, like that people on the no fly list shouldn't be allowed to own guns, which is insane because you don't actually have to be convicted of anything. That's just like it's a totally crazy, unconstitutional. You're put on a suspicion list, and the idea that you should lose legal rights because of that is crazy. But like most of it's fine. But like also the problem is that like because it's so important to them rhetorically to stake out this position of like being very reasonable about it, and they want to use it like as a culture war wedge to say look these crazy Republicans are willing to have guns flood the street while we have school shootings and all that. But on the other hand, they don't want to go too far in terms of restrictionism, right? Because they want to be able to defend how reasonable their proposals are. So they end up proposing all these things that I guess are fine probably, but like also like put together, none of this would actually put much of a dent in gun violence because like, you end up, because like you end up having so many exemptions and stuff, it doesn't really mean that much, which again is a clue that it's not really like, at least at the top level in practice, right? It's not really that they're that like, that it's not really about solving the problem. It's about using that to mobilize the base forever. And of course it's the same thing, but even more so on the other side, that it's like the sort of keeping people in a perpetual state of fear about gun grabbing liberals, is like an easy way to keep them mobilized. And like whatever the right gun policies would be in some like future socialist state, the idea that I mean strategically we certainly have nothing to gain from like jumping into like the culture war about this. And honestly, I think that like any real resolution with this issue is probably going to have to wait until after a lot of other stuff anyway.
It's also like it's an emotional issue. It's it's an economic issue. You know what I mean? It's like incentivizing crime is an economic issue, and they're like when they make a difference between like illegal and legal gun owners, that's kind of pushing it into that realm. And on top of if it's so many different things, it's honestly it's a cultural issue. Like there's societies that have that also have guns, not as many guns, but they don't have like the gun fetishism, which purposely is played up by the gun lobby and the Republican Party and just in general like I guess right-wing conservative media, but at the same time that is an issue now, and it's not something like they're never gonna. This cat just keeps running around my legs, but it's not like it's just so many like Hydra, like there's so many Hydra heads to that problem that just having some milquetoast regulations isn't going to ever change anything. But there's that moment of clarity that like Reagan had where he went from banning open carry in California because of the Black Panthers to running for president as like a gun rights toting which no one ever really called him on, by the way. I don't think.
No, and of course that's also the thing about this. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess my position's probably that like we should. I mean, I don't really think there's any like deep rights issue one way or the other. I mean, I think it's just kind of a pragmatic thing, like that. Like, I don't think that it's like horrible and authoritarian that there are societies where it's difficult or impossible to buy a gun, but also like, also it's not like, I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't see any principled reason to like make it, like to like put that issue front and center.
Yeah.
In the other direction. Like oftentimes it's a symptom, and sure, tackling symptoms can can be valuable under some circumstances, but this is so that's like one. And also, by the way, there's like a dumb ultra left version of this where people will like quote things that Marx said in 1848 about like, arming the workers, and like treat it as if Marx was like advocating some like principle that he thought that socialists should advocate for the next 200 years, rather than making like a really specific tactical point that like took place literally in the middle of a like violent revolution in 1848.
Yeah. And also at a time when it was easier to rebel against like a military state, because it's just kind of people at that point, you know what I mean? Like running at each other. And we're at the point where like there doesn't even have to be people. Like if you really there could never really be a violent revolution in the US, because like there's drones now. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different ways of killing people without even
you're going to have like a military that the transition to socialism in the United States in the 21st century is gonna be like a military like insurrection in the streets. I think for a variety of reasons is always feels kind of larpy to me. But anyway, so he didn't. So yeah, I wasn't interested in doing that one, but then somebody found he'd done or somebody linked to me. I mean, I guess this was a long time ago, but I'd never seen it. An article he wrote, like libertarianism.org, called his Taxation Theft, where he, it's like nuanced, but he basically says yes. And I was like, okay, that I'll debate him about, so that's that's like the GTAA bread and butter. So,
well, try not to tell him you're going to put him in jail and pulling a Sam Cedar. What do you think should happen if I don't pay my taxes? Sam, tell me, what do you think? Man, making Sam react to those videos, I think, was like one of the biggest stroke of geniuses we've had on GTAA so far. Like just the thought of like having Sam rewatch some of his libertarian debates.
Yeah, no, that was really, really fun. Speaking of which, I should say, for everybody watching, I'm going to be on Majority Report day after tomorrow, so Friday at 1 to talk a little bit about the about the new book.
Finally, what is taking them so long to?
I'm pretty angry about it. So,
about to reset that canceling that cancellation stance. canceling at least one comedian while the world burns.
Oh, exactly. Well, then it would be two, Jimmy Dore and Sam Cedar, but yeah.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, no, fair enough. So let's see. Let me just see. And I shall also mention, since somebody in the chat mentioned Yaron Brook, the guy from the Ayn Rand Institute, who said, who accused me memorably in season 1 of wanting to expropriate his television set. Since that's what they did on the kibbutz or whatever. So he just did a debate with Ashley Frowley, who's somebody who's a British Marxist who does stuff with Zero Books, and so I'm not sure about the date exactly, but I invited Ashley to come on GTA to talk about it. So that should be happening relatively soon. I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but I watched the opening statements. during the like while I was exercising this morning, and they had there's this point. It's like a 15-minute opening statement, and at like minute 11, Yaron says, "Well, Marxism says," and then he spends like 4 minutes saying that what Marxism says, and spoiler alert, Marxism does not say any of that stuff. So, lots to
well,
talk.
the way to get back at him is to say, well, Ayn Rand said, and then you spend 4 minutes.
Just make up stuff for 4 minutes. Ayn Rand, right.
Ayn Rand said, welfare for me, but not for thee. That's her.
Well, right. It's like Ayn Rand, as I understand it, thought that homeless people should be fed to sharks, and I don't agree with that.
I just think that would be an enormous waste of resources.
Exactly.
Means of destruction. I don't know.
Actually, I think the very last TMBS debunk I did was, I don't think it was Yaron, but I think it was somebody else from the Ayn Rand Institute, did a video justifying why they applied for a PPP loan.
I remember that.
Yeah, I think that was the last one.
Was it? It wasn't like, no, I'm thinking of the Reason guy. It wasn't like Michael Huemer. It was
definitely not Michael Huemer.
No, it was, I don't know. I remember, I feel like it was something, I feel like the name sounded like that. But yeah, no, I remember the one that you were talking about.
Let's see. Yeah.
I would have it in seconds if I had my other hard drive plugged in right now.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so Lauren asks, is there any reason to think that if guns were banned, some other form of violent behavior wouldn't take the place of gun violence? I mean, I think that the legitimate point that liberals who are really fixated on gun control would make in response to this is that, you could certainly kill people a hell of a lot more quickly and efficiently with guns than with most other weapons. Like that's absolutely true. But I also think that the other hand to that is that there's like that would be a good answer if we were actually talking about like total gun control, just like taking away all the guns, or maybe like, I don't know, like you could, or something like really like extreme on that level. At the very least, you take away all the handguns and like etc. Right, like that you do that. But the problem is that like if that's what the debate's about, okay, that's like a debate we could have. I'm not super optimistic about that, right? Like since right now we have more guns than people in the United States, and so the idea of like total disarmament to the population, doesn't strike me as wildly realistic. But I mean, maybe in the future after some cultural changes or whatever, and maybe I'd even like that. But I mean, but if we're just talking about those common sense gun control measures, then like that wouldn't actually do very much, about this problem. Like you can,
you could just turn around and use other guns to kill. Like,
exactly.
I mean, I don't know. I always think it's interesting
because all of those common sense gun reform things are always about making such fine distinctions between slightly different kinds of guns. So I'm not convinced that you really get as much benefits from that as they say you will, even if that was like a winnable political war at this point, which, I mean, whatever, granted, I mean, I support lots of stuff that's way more radical than that, but I also think it's stuff that we can, that we're in an easier position to convince the majority of the population is in their interests.
Yeah.
Which is,
well, I mean, England has, I mean, like the UK, I guess in general has that thing where they don't have as many guns, but then they have, a large amount of knife violence. But I feel like that's overblown by people that are trying to make the point that something else is going to replace gun violence. So like, but there are like pretty frequent knife attacks.
No, there are frequent knife attacks, but I think that's compatible with saying that they kill a lot fewer people for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
In any case,
It's also the most British thing ever, I feel like. Or I mean, either that or like pulling out a saber and.
Yeah. Well, I was like Doug Stanhope's joke on, I don't remember, one of his stand-up specials about how he goes to whenever he's in the UK, he's like, wow, like bar fights are like serious there in ways that they're really not here. Like, 95% of bar fights in the US are just like people like posturing and waiting for the bouncer to like break them up. But like UK, they'll really hurt each other because they have universal health care and no guns. So like you're not worried that the other person might have a gun, and like you're not worried that you're going to be bankrupted, paying for the hospital bills. So you can just kind of go nuts.
Worst case, you get like a gash across here, and you're like, "I'll have them stitch that right up for you, sir."
Exactly. All right, I got a jet. Head over to the other channel. So
all right, can you throw me the link in the chat so I can get that?
Yeah, let me do that right now. Actually, so it's debate. All right.
Can't wait for that 10 minutes of intro music that they.
Well, with any luck, it'll be a little less this time. So I just put it in the private chat. I'll see you in a couple hours.
All right. All right. How can we get the show canceled? T-minus 1 minute and 40 seconds until this starts. Hours. It's going to be at least a couple hours. Hey, stop trying to take down my mural. Yeah, let's get this stream taken down by the Israeli lobby. No, just hanging out. All right. We got 1 minute until the debate supposedly starts. So what's up, chat? How's it going? How you guys doing? No, I'm gonna be streaming it off here, so you can just stick around with this. Yeah, this video is gonna be a stream of the debate just as soon as Ben gets on it. I don't know, it's just not to get us the views and not to get modern day debates the views. We're going to here. I'm gonna get this. See, I'm gonna full screen it as soon as this cat's named Petunia, and she wants attention really badly right now and isn't getting attention, so she's gonna try to pull down my mural over and over again so that I chase after her. Yeah, they have some like, I mean, I don't know. Now that Ben's not on here, I guess they have some like, is God real kind of debates, like just pointless, really just pointless debates in my opinion. Like it seems like a lot of them have a very like religious tint to them. And I mean, I personally have no interest. I don't even have an interest really in like the Hitchens style, like Hitchens versus religious people debate, because I feel like the debates are pointless because no one's like mind really gets changed. It's not like you can like reason somebody's brain into all of a sudden, but that level of religious propaganda anyway, like reason someone's mind into that, into being like, maybe there is no God. So it seems like a lot of their debates are religious based, and I really don't have any energy or time to look at that. Oops. Oh no, I didn't say this debate. I meant, see, there's their 10 minutes of, yeah, I don't know. Not this debate is a God debate. I'm saying that, the Modern Day Debate channel has a lot of like God-based, like religious debates. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm not saying that those debates shouldn't happen. I guess what I'm saying is that, I mean, I personally don't have time for them. I think over time people get exposed to religious or atheistic ideas or agnostic ideas, and they think deeper about it. I don't know, number one, if like a debate is the best forum for that, and number two, maybe it works for some people. I don't really know what really turns people towards atheism necessarily, and there's certain people that they claim it's like based on some kind of the opposite, I guess, of a religious experience, but I'd watch a Richard Wolff versus God debate. That's what I feel like that would be interesting. Like literally versus the actual God. Yes, if your Hulk Hogan brother is a gender neutral term of affection. I don't know. For a while I was saying like hell yeah, brother to everybody, and I wasn't even like thinking about it in terms of gender whatsoever. Like I think it's definitely a gender neutral term. Yeah, but can you really be cranky in front of God? I envision God like the AMC version of like Preacher. Like I think they did a really good job with that, with like really narcissistic, just like whiny God who wants love from people without like, I don't know. I think bro is I consider bro a gender neutral term. I think I don't know, like not like, I think you can use it in a gendered way and whatever, but like I feel like I say bro to everybody too. Oh, it's starting. We go.
Thanks so much for being with us, and the floor is all yours, Dr.
So here's my simple argument that taxation is theft. Premise: taking property without the owner's consent is theft. Why do I think that? I think that's basically definitional. I don't know if that's the exact precise definition of theft, but it's something pretty.
Here, I'm gonna start this. I'm gonna start this over because it was muted for everybody. So hold on.
Dr. Michael Huemer, who's on the left side of your screen, thanks so much for being with us, and the floor is all yours, Dr. Huemer.
All right, thanks. I'm going to share my screen because I have a little slideshow that I prepared. All right, so I'm going to talk about whether taxation is theft, and my answer is yes, it is a form of theft. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give a simple argument that taxation is theft. Then I'm going to talk about objections to this. And then I'll talk about possible alternatives to taxation. And if I somehow have time at the end, I'll say some side remarks about the distribution of the tax burden. So here's my simple argument that taxation is theft. Premise: taking property without the owner's consent is theft. Why do I think that? I think that's basically definitional. I don't know if that's the exact precise definition of theft, but it's something pretty close to that, right? Obviously, if I took people's property without consent, if I like go to my neighbor and I go, hey, you have to give me, 10% of the amount of money you made last year, otherwise I'm going to kidnap you and lock you in a cage and so on, I would in fact be a thief. And that's because I would be taking his money without consent. Second premise: taxation takes people's property without their consent. The taxation is not collected purely voluntarily, it's compulsory, right? They don't ask you, would you like to pay taxes? Would you like to buy our services? They don't do that. They say, you have to give the money, otherwise we're going to send them with guns to your house to, kidnap you, lock you in a cage and stuff like that. That is a non-consensual property transfer. And so conclusion, taxation is theft. And it seems to me pretty simple and straightforward. For some reason, most people don't like to call taxation theft. I guess most people think that sounds really weird and, maybe counterintuitive, but I find it hard to see how it could not be theft. All right, well, so I thought of some possible objections that people might say. So first objection, thieves don't generally provide valuable services after they take your money, and the government does provide valuable services, which is why they have to take the money to pay for those services. My response to this is, well, that doesn't prevent it from being theft. So I'm not saying that they don't provide any valuable services. I'm just saying providing valuable services after you non-consensually transfer somebody's property doesn't stop you from being a thief. So as one example, imagine that I'm running a charity, and the way that I collect money for my charity is I just go out and mug people on the street. Okay, but after I take the money from them, then I feed it into my charity, which actually helps me. I would still be a thief, right? I mean, I'm doing something good with the money, but it is still true that I stole it. Another example is the mafia, which collects money for protection. And by the way, in case you don't know this, they actually do provide protection. And not just from themselves, but if another criminal starts messing with you, you can go to the mafia boss. If you pay protection money, you can go to the mafia boss, and they will fuck up the other criminal. So they are actually protecting you, which coincidentally is also the main service that the government says that they're providing for you, that they're charging money for as well. And the fact that they're providing this service doesn't make them not thieves, right? What makes them thieves is that, well, they're providing the service, but they're not giving you free choice as to whether you want to pay for it or not. Here's another objection. Maybe it's not theft because we actually agreed to pay taxes. This would be following the so-called social contract theory, according to which government is established by some kind of agreement between the government and the people. The main problem with this is it's just factually false. We just never, in fact, made such an agreement. So, nobody can show me the contract that has my signature on it. There's no time at which anybody actually ever asked me, hey, do you want to have a government? Do you want to pay taxes? Whatever. And they didn't ask you either, right? They don't ask anyone. They just do it, right? Okay, here's a third objection. It's not theft because it's legal. You might say, maybe theft is an illegal property transfer, right? And maybe you think property rights are produced by the laws created by the government. And so the government gets to just say, if they want some money, they just get to make the laws that say they're entitled to that money, and then it becomes theirs. So it's not really your property, right? Okay, that's something you might say. My response to that is, well, property rights are not solely produced by government law. There are natural rights. So this is a hypothetical example. Let's say you go to some remote location where it's outside the jurisdiction of any government. And there's this hermit living out there by himself. And the reason it's a hermit is there's no society, so that you can't say that there's some other form of law there, right? All right, so he's living out there by himself, and he's created a spear, right, that he made from wood and stone and whatever. And when you find this hermit, you decide that you like his spear, so you just take it and leave, right? We would say that you stole his spear, correct, right? So, and that shows that, stealing doesn't require there to be a government jurisdiction, and doesn't require there to be a law created by a government. Okay, objection 4. Yeah, but taxation is justified because we need it to maintain law and order, which is really important. Okay, and my response to this is, again, that doesn't stop it from being theft, right? You have a theft if you have a non-consensual property transfer, even if you then do something really good with the property. My other response is I think there might be alternative means of funding the government. So it might not actually be necessary to do taxation. which I'm going to talk about in a second. All right, so what could the possible alternatives be? How could we provide law and order without taxation? Well, my basic idea is user fees. So if you have to have a government, okay, side note, actually I'm an anarchist, but let's not go into that. Let's just say that somehow you have to have a government for whatever reason. But still, maybe they could fund themselves by just charging money for the services that they're providing, just like everyone else who provides services and gets money. So in this proposal, they wouldn't simply force you to buy their service. They would say, we have a service. If you want it, pay us some money. If you don't pay us, we just won't provide you the service. We won't kidnap you and lock you in a cage. We just won't provide our service. Right? So what could this be like? It might be, well, if you haven't paid your tax bill, right, it wouldn't be taxation anymore because it would be voluntary. So if you haven't paid the fees, they would say, well, you can't call the police. Or if you call the police, they'll just ignore you. If a crime gets committed against you, they won't investigate it. They won't arrest anyone, right? You won't be able to use the government courts, whatever, won't be able to call the government fire department or whatever. So they could say that. And if the government services are super valuable and, they're reasonably good at providing them, and if the prices were reasonable, then people would in fact pay. You might make this objection, maybe this wouldn't be able to raise enough money to pay for all of the great social programs that we want the government to do. Okay, if you know that I'm a libertarian, you probably know my main response to this, which is we don't need all those social welfare programs. So it might be true that you couldn't fund, you can't fund everything the government is actually doing with voluntary user fees, but that just means that you should cut back on all those programs. All right, now I remind you of my charity mugging example before, where I was running this really good charity and I collect money by mugging people. Most people think that that's unjustified. Like, I can't just go out and mug people in order to collect money, even though it's going to charity and the charity is good and valuable to society, right? Still can't do it. So I think that's like the government social welfare programs. I don't see why they should be able to force you to pay for them, even if they're good programs, right? Which, by the way, side note, I think they're a lot less good than most private charities. Okay, so this is my summary. Taxation is a non-voluntary property transfer, which is theft. Now, I'm not saying that that automatically rules it out as being unjustified, because I think there could be cases in which theft is justified. Like, it could be justified in stealing something in an emergency, it's necessary to prevent something much worse from happening. But that does make it harder to justify. So it's not irrelevant that I say that it's theft. It's not normatively irrelevant. It means that you need a special justification, similar to the justification you would need if you were stealing, if an ordinary person was stealing somebody's property. Okay, am I out of time? Have I used up the 10 minutes? Okay. Oh, another minute, okay. All right, I was just gonna make some comments about the way the tax burden is justified, and this isn't really relevant to whether it's theft or not, but I think it's interesting. I think that most people don't know about it. So this is a table that I made. This is data from the Congressional Budget Office in 2013. I haven't updated it lately, but it shows they divided the population into 5 groups by income. So lowest quintile refers to the 5th of the population that has the lowest income. And the numbers in the table are averages, right? So 15,800 is the average income of people who are in the bottom 20% income group. And it shows how much money they receive from the government as transfers. So social welfare programs that give you money or benefits, and how much they pay on average in taxes, and then their tax as a percentage of their market income. And then the net tax is the amount of tax they paid minus the amount of transfers they received from the government. And what you see in the table is that for the bottom 3 quintiles, the bottom 60%, the average net tax is negative, meaning they're receiving more money than they're paying in. And it's only for the top 2 quintiles that's positive, and almost all of it is paid by the highest quintile. And these are people who, on average, they make $250,000 a year, so you probably pretty much call them the rich. So basically, the rich are carrying everybody else. This is the same data in a bar graph. The blue is how much money in absolute dollars they're paying. Okay, and so I just want to say this, this is a table with another row added, which is the portion of the total net tax that is paid by each group. And what you see is the highest quintile is paying 183% of the total net tax. Sorry, am I out of time? Okay, anyway, just ask yourself, does that seem like a fair distribution?
You got it. Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Huemer. We will now kick it over to Dr. Ben Burgess and give a little bit of extra time on there. So we'll give Ben we'll give you the exact same amount of time for your opening. And so with that, thanks so much for being with us today. And want to remind you folks, if it's your first time here, Modern Day Debate is a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics, including this juicy one you'll see on the bottom right of your screen between T-Jump and Vosh. Next week, the super straight debate. You don't want to miss it, so hit that subscribe button right now, as well as that notification button so you don't miss out on it. And with that, thanks so much, Dr. Ben Burgess. The floor is all yours for your opening.
All right. Thank you, James. Thanks, Michael. So I do want to start by answering the question we heard at the end. Is it fair that the wealthiest people pay many times the percentage, the average percentage? Yes, of course it is. But I want to we can get into that later. If you want to talk about why that is and why they should be paying even more, and why that's no reason at all to think that they're paid an unfair percentage. But first, I want to talk about two questions that are more directly central to what we're talking about this evening. The first is taxation theft, and the second is taxation wrong? And then finally, could the answer to the first question is the second question, is taxation wrong? Be yes, because the answer to the first question is yes. In other words, could taxation be wrong because it's theft? Now, I'm going to say that it's not wrong and it's not theft, but as a logically prior point, I do want to say that even if the answer to both was yes, the answer to is taxation is wrong can't be theft, because the answer to, the answer to is it wrong can't be yes, because the answer to is it theft is yes. It has to be the other way around. It has to, if the answer to both is yes and there's a relationship between those two answers, it has to be theft because it's wrong and not wrong because it's theft. I know that's counterintuitive, but we'll see if I can cash that check. But I think that saying that taxation is wrong because it's theft is like saying that abortion is wrong because it's murder. The concept of wrongness is built into the concept of murder. That's why we don't talk about murdering enemy soldiers in a just war, or murdering a comatose patient who asked to be murdered in his living will, and we certainly don't talk about committing murder in self-defense. Saying abortion is wrong because it's murder is a noisy way of saying that abortion is wrong because it's wrong. And adopting an argument that I got from Michael Brunig, I maintain that something exactly similar is true of taxation is wrong because it's theft. And this critique is going to apply with equal force to the moderate version of the taxation is theft claim that we just heard, that, well, sometimes theft is justified in extreme circumstances. So maybe sometimes, taxation is justified in extreme circumstances. It's going to apply to that just as much as to the more hardcore version of the taxation is wrong because it's theft argument that says that it's absolutely wrong. So the position that we just heard, as I understand it, says that the prima facie wrongness of taxation can sometimes be canceled out by competing considerations. And a lot of non-libertarians might hear that second part, that, well, it's theft, but theft isn't always on balance wrong, and lose interest in the first part. After all, if we're not perhaps prepared to let indigent people starve to death, if the only way to prevent that outcome is through taxpayer-funded social programs, you might think, what does it matter if we say it's theft, but then theft is justified in extreme circumstances, rather than a clean, simple, it's not theft? That might sound like a distinction without a difference. But I think, as Michael kind of hinted at in his opening statement, or spelled out a little bit, it actually does make a giant difference. It certainly makes a giant difference when you start to think about things like whether it would be morally justifiable to have the sorts of things that Bernie Sanders was talking about during his 2 runs for president, like Medicare for all or universal tuition-free higher education. which would, as his centrist opponents point out in those races, involve raising taxes even on middle-class people, and would benefit not just people who are desperately in need of those things, people who wouldn't have health insurance or couldn't go to college if those things were treated as commodities, but even people who might be able to afford them just fine if they were treated as commodities, because the Democratic Socialist position is that things like healthcare and higher education are important human rights that everybody should have, whether they could pay for them if they're treated as commodity or not, and that treating them as a commodity is morally indefensible. And so that is going to be a basic distinction. And I think the charity mugger thing actually brings out the point quite nicely, because, of course, for example, Medicare for All would actually be a financial boon to middle-income taxpayers, since the current combined cost of taxes and private health insurance premiums is much more than the future tax burden would be for middle-income taxpayers if we had Medicare for All. But of course, if you think that it's wrong, it's theft and all of that, then that would just be like the charity mugger. And I think if we take a broader view and think about what would be ruled out by saying that it's wrong and it has a wrongness that's similar to theft, maybe taxing Peter to pay for Paul's health insurance is like stealing a loaf of bread from Peter to pay Paul. Although honestly, even that sounds a little dubious, but even if it is like that, it's certainly only like that if Peter would otherwise not have health insurance. On a more mundane level, think about public libraries. I think those are vital public institutions, and privatizing them would be deeply unjust. But if we see taxation in the same light as street-level theft, the justification for public libraries comes under severe threat. Michael Huemer might grant you that mugging an innocent person would be defensible if this was the only way to feed your starving family, but I seriously doubt he'd give you a pass for mugging an innocent to pay for books for your family, because they'd already read all the books in the house. So why do I think it's circular to say that taxation is wrong, or even all else being equal wrong, because it's theft? The reason is that part of what it means to say that something is theft is that it's wrong. And this is worth digging into. This is a crucial point, even though it might sound nitpicky. Because theft doesn't and can't just mean the definition that we just heard. It can't mean just taking something that's currently in someone else's possession without their permission. Because if it was just taking something that's currently in someone else's possession without their permission, then recovering stolen property would be theft. So that can't be right. It can't even, as Michael indicated, with the hermit spear example, it can't even be that theft is taking something that's currently in someone else's possession without their permission when they have a legal right to it. And in fact, it really can't be that if you're going to say that taxation is theft, because of course, if taxation is legally established, then the portion of your income you owe in taxes legally belongs to the IRS, not to you. So that doesn't work either. So it can't just be taking something that's currently in someone else's possession without their permission. It can't even be that plus a legal right to it. It has to be that you're taking something from someone else that's currently in someone else's possession without their permission when they have a moral right to it. And not even just a mild default, like all else being equal, the fact that something's currently in someone's possession is like a reason for it to stay in their possession, but a really, really strong moral right. Maybe one that can be overridden by someone stealing a loaf of bread to feed their starving family, but certainly not one that can be overridden for all the other social purposes that I've just mentioned. And so I would say that all of Dr. Huemer's work is still ahead of him, because he hasn't given us any reason to think that the people, for example, who are paying payroll taxes to pay for old age insurance, Social Security, that those workers have a moral right to their possessions in ways that that overrides the moral right of the retirees to get social insurance. And if we can't say on pain of circularity that we have a strong moral right to the portion of our income being taxed because taxing it would be like theft, we must have that strong moral right because of some substantive libertarian moral theory of property rights. I've yet to hear such a theory. Maybe one will be provided in the rebuttal. Meanwhile, though, I want to end on this point. Our moral horror at mugging or home invasion robbery is not reduced one iota if the victim is a public school teacher or a firefighter or an artist living off a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and the mugger is a private sector taxpayer. But why not? If some substantive libertarian theory of property rights is correct, then that private sector taxpayer robbing that public school teacher would be recovering stolen property. So it seems to me that the libertarian can't have it both ways. Either they can trade on our moral horror at home invasions and back alley muggings to convince us that taxation is wrong, or they can ground the wrongness of taxation in a substantive libertarian theory of property rights. But I do think they have to pick.
Thank you very much. Did you have anything else? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. You got it. And so thanks very much. We are going to jump into the rebuttal sections now, folks. These are each going to be 10 minutes from each speaker. And then we'll have, following that, about 30 minutes of open dialogue and then 30 minutes or so of Q&A at the end. But do want to let you know right now, folks, our guests are linked in the description. And so we highly encourage you to check out their links. And that includes if you're listening to Modern Day Debate via podcast, as all of our debates are uploaded via podcast format as well. And you can find our guest links in the description box for each podcast episode. So thanks for that. And with that, Dr. Michael Huemer, the floor is all yours for that 10-minute rebuttal.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I don't know, just going to comment on a few things on how to define theft. I said it was a transfer, non-voluntary transfer of property, something like that. I think Ben's view is, well, it sounded like maybe his view was, oh, it's wrongful transfer of property, or maybe the view is just like the term property, like property already contains a moral implication, right? Like saying that it's your property means that you have a right to it or something. Now, I don't think theft is defined to be wrongful because, you know, you can have a theft that's justified. But, you know, it might be that the notion of property is normative, like something that you have rights, certain kinds of rights over. So I guess that sounds okay, but I don't think that that makes much of a problem because, like, I think I'm pretty confident of, you know, my belief in property, and I don't think that I have to prove that there are property rights. So I guess let me just go to the, you know, that's the second thing I want to talk about. Like, yeah, why does anybody have property rights? So now it happens that I have basically a Lockean view of property, right? That, okay, so I think if there's, you know, stuff in the state of nature and whatever, nobody's using it, then you can go and mix your labor with it, and then you can acquire it, and you can transfer the property by mutual consent. And, you know, I don't have exactly a worked out theory of why there are property rights at all, but I don't really think that I have to give this like a complete theory about that, or I don't think I have to give much of a theory at all. And partly because I think it's extremely widely accepted. And so I think it's kind of like a default assumption unless somebody can show why there shouldn't be any property. I don't think that there's like really a viable alternative system, right? So there are valuable goods in the world where there are different uses of them that people want to make that are incompatible with each other, and we need some kind of solution to that. And the solution that we're using is property rights, which is each of these things gets assigned to a particular person who makes the decisions about how it gets used, okay? And so there are other possible systems. So there could be a system where it's just a complete free-for-all. You know, anybody just uses anything at any time. But I basically just don't think that there's a viable alternative system that anyone would want that doesn't involve property. Okay, now there are things like, you know, socialism and communism, where people sometimes say that they don't believe in private property, but that's not actually what they mean, right? Because like in the socialist countries, it was not the case that nobody could own anything. It was the case that you could not own a business. It was not the case you couldn't own any property, right? Like you had money, and you know you could own your shirt and whatever, and these other things. Okay. Anyway, so the other thing I wanted to say is, so I think that I'm kind of using common sense morality when I say, like, I think people have property, and like, you know, the money that I earned working at some job or something, that's my money. Okay, and I think that if you think that that's not my money, then it's hard to explain why a random person can't then just come and take it from me. Like, okay, if I don't have a property right in that money. Now you might think, maybe there's some story about, well, it's actually the government's money, right? Maybe it's the government's money. That's why the random person can't take it, not because they'd be stealing from me. They'd be stealing from the government. I guess, you have to imagine that it was the money that I was going to send to the IRS. That's the way to All right, but anyway, but I think that if that's your view, I think that we need an explanation of why the government is special, right? So like, they're just declaring that they get to take a certain amount of money. They're declaring that it's theirs. And I want to know why it's not okay for just any other person or organization to just declare that some stuff is theirs and then forcibly take it. Like, what gives those people the authority to say how much money everybody owes them? And I basically just don't think that there's any good answer to that. Okay, anyway, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was, can you take money from, just like you go to some public school teacher and can just like rob them? And this doesn't really seem very good. It doesn't seem like you should do that. It doesn't seem permissible. I think that's kind of analogous to, you've identified some thief and like that's the person's occupation. And like, imagine that you follow the thief around. So if you rob the thief, I think that's okay. Right? The guy whose occupation, like his sole occupation is thief, you can take his money from him. Okay, but what if you do this? You follow him around, you wait until he goes to some business and he spends the money. So like he goes to the dry cleaner, he takes his dry cleaning there, and then later he comes back, he collects dry cleaning. And you know how many items he had dry cleaned, so you know what the bill was. Okay, then later that night you break into the dry cleaners and you take that amount of money. Is that okay? Like, I'm not sure that that's okay. That's a little shady, right? Or you could take it a step further, right? So you might say, oh, but it's stolen money, so like it's okay. But what if we took it a step further? Like, okay, and then the dry cleaner spends that money somewhere else. Like, and then you go to the next person, right? So instead of robbing the dry cleaner, you break into some other business because the dry cleaner spent some money. And like you do some calculation to figure out what portion of the money this other business had that was stolen. This doesn't seem okay, right? So, I mean, I don't really know. I don't know what the right account is. Like, I think it's definitely okay to take back from the first thief. But if you go to the people that the thief spent the money on, it gets more questionable then. And sort of like as you go further steps, it gets more questionable. The other thing is I would feel differently if I thought it was like an illegitimate job that shouldn't exist or something. So if you're like, like if you're talking about taking money from the defense contractors, well, it's not that I think that that's illegitimate, I guess, but I think that it's just too much of it. All right, so, but let's say it's, these companies that's making the bombs for blowing up people in Iraq or whatever, and you think that that shouldn't be happening at all, then it's fine to take that, right? It's fine to take the money from that. I would agree with that. But the thing is, like school teacher, it's not like a job that shouldn't exist. It just should be funded differently. And if the government wasn't doing the stealing, it's not like there wouldn't be school teachers. They wouldn't be getting any money, right? I mean, it would have to be privatized, right? So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's exactly fair to say, oh yeah, you just like take all their money, right? Because they were funded by the government, right? By the way, like if you thought that, the government is into so much of the economy, like, oh my God, like, is anybody entitled to any of their money, right? Because it's like, I mean, there's so much influence on everything. Like if you try to trace, like what money would I still have if the government wasn't doing anything? Like it might be that no particular transaction that happened would have happened, right? So then it's not, I don't know, and then it's not clear that any of us would be entitled to the money, right? So, okay, but anyway, like I just want to say, like it's a kind of a complicated question. What is the appropriate remedy if you think that taxation is theft? But I don't think that changes, just the judgment that it is a form of theft. Like I'd like the government to stop doing it, but I'm not sure exactly what the rest of us should do about it if the government refuses to stop. Okay, that's all I have for now.
You got to thank you very much for that rebuttal, and we'll kick it over to Dr. Ben Burgess for his 10-minute rebuttal as well. Thanks so much, Ben. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that everybody's like clear about the larger dialectical context here. So Michael Huemer said in his opening statement that taxation is wrong because it's like theft, because the thing that makes something theft is that you're taking someone's property. Please flag that because it's a deeply equivocal word to use here. Someone's property without their consent. One of the things that I pointed out in response is that, you know, what their property is, right? What we mean by their property is deeply ambiguous. So one thing it could mean is any property that currently happens to be in their possession, but that can't be it, or else recovering stolen property, you know, without the permission of the thief would be theft, which is certainly not, you know, we heard the claim that this is moral common sense. That's certainly not moral common sense. Another thing that it could mean is that it's, you know, theft is a non-voluntary transfer of someone's legal property. But with the hermit spear example, Dr. Huemer made it clear that that's not the notion that he has in mind. And in any case, it can't be the notion that he has in mind, because if so, the suggestion that taxation could count as a form of theft would just be incoherent on the face of it, because of course you do not have any sort of legal right to property that's being taxed. So that leaves the idea that it's something you have a moral right to. Dr. Huemer said just now that wrongfulness can't be baked into the meaning of theft because theft can sometimes, under extreme circumstances, be justified. But I think that's entirely too quick. You can say that what it means to steal something, that, you know, that part of that, it means taking away property that someone generally has a moral right to, that all else being equal, they have a moral right to, that they have a moral right to unless some dire emergency overrides their normal moral right to it. And in all cases, it's being built in, and some such notion has to be built in, unless Dr. Huemer can give us a fourth alternative to your property means property currently in your possession, your property means property that you have a legal right to, and your property means property that you have a moral right to, even if that moral right is a defeasible moral right. So it's, and if you even think that we're talking about defeasible moral right, then it seems to me that saying that taxation is wrong because it's theft is still hopelessly circular, that, you know, it's wrong because it's wrong. So that's one question. Can we ground the alleged wrongfulness of taxation in its status, allegedly, as a form of theft? And I don't think we can non-circularly do that. Second question, well, if that's not it, right, why is it wrong, right? Like, or to put the question differently, if we are talking about even a defeasible but still very strong moral right, I mean, presumably we're not talking about just like a mild default that could be overridden for the sake of public libraries and public schools and NEA grants and all of that stuff, but a very strong moral right. Where does this very strong moral right come from? Well, I heard at least two different answers there. One was that Dr. Huemer accepts the Lockean theory of property rights, or more or less the Lockean theory of property rights. The other one was that he doesn't actually need to give us the theory of property rights because it's extremely widely accepted that property is a thing that should exist. But I think there's a really important slippage at the end of that argument. It's widely accepted that property is something that should exist. In other words, that some people should have exclusive rights or near exclusive rights to use some, you know, objects in the external world. But that is compatible with everything from a Lockean theory of property rights that might actually ground the idea that taxation is theft, to a Rawlsian theory of property rights, where you say, sure, you accept a lot of the things that we just heard from Dr. Huemer, that of course, you have this problem of different people wanting access to different kinds of scarce resources. And even, as he quite correctly says, socialists who don't think that some people should have exclusive access, access to the means of production, certainly think that we should have exclusive access to, shirts and whiskey bottles and, and all of that stuff. But that's totally compatible with saying that the right view is that we should have exclusive, that the things that we should have exclusive property rights to or near exclusive property rights to are after tax income, not our pre-tax income. That's a completely separate question from whether property is a thing that should exist in the world, whether there are pieces of property that people have moral rights to, of course, but whether there are things there are external objects in the world that some people should have near exclusive rights to is totally compatible with either saying that the worker who's being taxed to pay for Social Security benefits for retirees is the person with the moral right to that dollar, and with saying that the retiree is the person with the defeasible but very strong, moral right to that dollar. Just saying that property is a thing that should exist takes us no further forward at all in answering the question of which of them has a morally correct claim. Finally, I want to come back to this question of whether, in fact, what Dr. Huemer is defending is common sense morality. I think it's not. I know I went very quickly past the Rawlsian stuff. We haven't really gotten into what either the Rawlsian or the Lockean theories of property rights actually look like. Maybe we can do that in open discussion or Q&A. But for the sake of not running out of time, I want to come back to this point about common sense morality. He says, well, this is common sense morality because the money you earned at some job is your money. If it's not your money, can a random person come and take it? Why is the government special? Well, I'd say that the example about the private sector taxpayer mugging the public school teacher actually shows precisely that this is not even compatible with common sense morality, because we heard some very tentative, very, halfway kind of things that could be said for, well, it's not exactly great to rob the public school teacher, but common sense morality makes zero distinction between a private sector taxpayer robbing a public school teacher and somebody robbing a private sector employee or business owner. No distinction whatsoever. So if you are going to make a distinction, it doesn't sound like common sense morality to me. So is this like stealing, would this, on the assumption that taxation is theft, would a private sector taxpayer motivated by libertarian principles stealing from a public school teacher, would that be like stealing from Tony Soprano's dry cleaner? Well, no, because presumably, one difference is that the dry cleaner doesn't have that doesn't have an income that's entirely derived from theft, whereas if taxation is theft, any public employee, by definition, has an income that is 100% derived from theft. And another obvious disanalogy between the dry cleaner and the public employee is that the public employee knows that 100% of their income came from taxation. So this is like somebody who is presumably, if taxation is theft, is knowingly accepting stolen property. In fact, their entire job is accepted stolen property. They're less like Tony Soprano's dry cleaner than like one of Tony Soprano's employees, who has a income that's entirely derived from money that they know is laundered from the mafia. Sure, is it true that the immoral intuition that it's okay to recover stolen property gets weaker the more steps you go? It is. By the way, I don't think the lock-in theory of property rights can make sense of that intuition, but yeah, it is true that intuitively it gets weaker the more steps we go away. But also in the case of a public employee, we've gone exactly one step. Theft, here's my stolen money. And finally, this idea that the government runs so much of the economy that if people aren't entitled to the money they get from government, it's not clear that any of us are entitled to anything. I think that that is completely correct, but I think that it cuts against any sort of lock-in property rights derived idea that taxation is theft, because it undercuts the idea that we all have this very strong property right to our pre-tax income that we can make sense of through some sort of lock-in or quasi-lock-in theory of property rights. So I think that too shows that this can't count as a kind of common sense morality.
You got it. Thank you very much, Dr. Burgess, as well. Now we're going to jump into the open conversation, folks. And friendly reminder that our guests are linked in the description, so check those out. And want to remind you, as always, folks, to be your regular, friendly selves, attacking the arguments and not the person. Thanks so much, as the vast majority of you do a great job of that, and we appreciate it. So anyway, the floor is all yours, Dr. Huemer and Dr. Burgess. Thanks so much.
Thanks. I feel like I still didn't hear why the government is special. So like if I was doing stuff that looked like what the government is doing, I'd be a thief, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why they get to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's my main problem.
So I think part of what I said was indirectly responsive to it, which is that the person who believes that taxation is theft has exactly the same problem. That it cuts both ways, and it cuts both ways to a precisely equal extent, actually maybe even greater this way, because as you point out, so much income is ultimately derived from the government. In fact, it's not clear that we would, if not for this so-called theft, there would be anything to steal, because money gets its value from the fact that it is taxed. The money in your pocket and my pocket would not be worth anything if taxation didn't exist. But why is it, either from my perspective as somebody who believes that the retiree living on Social Security does have a moral right to that Social Security income, or from, why is it that from my perspective it's okay to have taxation as a mechanism for doing that transfer, and why is it that from your perspective, out of all the things that we can morally legitimately do to rectify this alleged injustice, one of them is not having workers mug retirees to get back that Social Security money. And I think that the equivalence of these suggests to me that the right answer isn't a deep principled one. The thing is that somebody has to enforce whatever property rights you believe in. Right? Whether the scheme of property rights that you believe in is one whereby everybody can sort of keep whatever they happen to be in possession of after market transactions, or whether the scheme of property rights you believe in is that everybody gets to have whatever they'll get after a just system of redistribution. Someone has to enforce that distribution, and there are massive consequentialist reasons why it's preferable for it to be some sort of orderly, predictable, non-chaotic, non-terrifying mechanism like paying, like having a central government collecting taxes rather than vigilantes in the street using their best judgment.
Okay, so I'm getting that. Okay, so the government is special because it's really good to have a government. To have the government doing this stuff, and it's a lot better than having somebody else doing it. That's what I'm getting. But then I don't understand why the charity mugging isn't okay. Because like if it's really a consequentialist reason, like, well, I'm producing better consequences. Just like people, so stipulate that that's the case, assuming you agree that that's possible. They could be stealing. I could be taking somebody's money in the way that would conventionally be called stealing, and then I could spend it in a way that produces more good, right? So like, I mean, if the justification for government is a consequentialist one, then I don't see why the charity mugger doesn't get to do that.
Because the same consequentialist justification can't be offered. Part of the consequentialist justification can be offered, that the charity mugger, if they're doing, more the exactly, the charities that they should morally do, that they have, that it's going in the that's going to the right place. But the consequentialist justification that I just offered can't be given to the charity mugger, because the consequentialist considerations that I was bringing up, which remember are separate from what the right distribution of goods is, right? You've got a libertarian theory of what the right distribution of goods is, that the just distribution of goods is that everybody has whatever they can get through a series of market transactions where they respect the rules of the market, and maybe all the property ultimately goes back to some Lockean just act of original acquisition. That, that's one theory. I've got my theory of what counts as a just distribution, which would ultimately be a Rawlsian one, that it's one that we would agree to if we were designing a society and we didn't know who we were going to be in that society. But whatever you think the right answer to that question is, somebody has to do the enforcement, right? Somebody, in other words, has to enforce property claims. And so the distinction between the charity mugger and the government paying for social programs, I actually think there are other distinctions, but the one that I already pointed to was that having random muggers just sort of using their own judgment engaged in violence on the street causes a lot of chaos and fear and unpredictability in ways that having a regular, routine, democratically legitimate system of taxation, where it's baked in when you get paid, this part is going to be withdrawn, you're going to owe this part in taxes, just doesn't.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I understood that. So you sort of restated the argument. So I'm not saying that the same consequentialist reason applies. I'm saying there is a consequentialist reason for the charity mugger, right? And so like what you said at the end there, it sounded like, oh, well, you're going to cause social chaos, but that really doesn't seem likely. So like there's a lot of mugging occurring in the country already. There are like millions of crimes every year. So if I go out and mug someone, that's not going to appreciably contribute to social chaos. And then I'm producing a good consequence. I don't see why it has to be exactly the same good consequence the government is producing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty clear distinction to me that that we have that you have one package of good consequences that doesn't have any that includes the avoidance of social chaos, fear, etc. And you have another package of good consequences that includes everything but that. That one of them would have a different moral status than the other. That seems pretty straightforward.
This does not seem very straightforward to me. Okay, so is consequentialism true?
No, but that doesn't mean that consequentialist considerations are morally irrelevant, especially when there isn't any sort of deontological principle that would override them that I would accept in this case.
Okay, so maybe this is your argument, like, well, there are consequentialist reasons for doing the charity mugging, but there are stronger consequentialist reasons for the government taking the money. And so like that's why it's okay for the government.
Yeah, so I think that there are non-consequentialist reasons. There are Rawlsian reasons why we should have a distribution of goods that's not just whatever comes out of the free market. Those are in principle reasons. Now we're asking a different question, which is how should that distribution should be enforced? Should it be enforced by everybody sort of using their individual judgment in this unpredictable, chaotic way, or should it be enforced through a orderly, predictable system? And that, consequentialist reason seems like a pretty strong and compelling one to me.
I mean, so like here's a view. Okay, there's a consequentialist reason for me to mug the people on the street and give it to charity, but that reason is just not strong enough to outweigh their property rights. Like maybe there's a prima facie right that could be outweighed by sufficiently strong consequences, but it's just not strong enough in the case, right? But it is strong enough for the government, right? But that would be overly convenient. And I mean, I think that the charity mugger might actually have a stronger reason because, what if they're an effective altruist and they're giving it to a really good charity and the government is actually not a really effective cause, right? Like, the vast majority of the money the government is spending is not going to good causes, right? Like a huge amount of it is wasted. So, I mean, it seems like, I don't know, the charity mugger maybe has a stronger.
Well, I mean, I obviously don't think that the charity mugger has a stronger case. I think that having universal social rights, paid for by progressive taxation, free at the point of service, is unfathomably morally superior to relying on individual effective altruists. That relying on charity is degrading. It puts you in a position, it makes you much less free because it puts you in a position of powerlessness, because the person giving you the charity, can cut it off at any time. So having it ties people, to their jobs, because they don't want to have to, they don't want to quit those jobs, because then they'd be, then they would be sort of thrown on the mercy of charity and hoping that people are effective altruists. So I think that the government does have a much better case just to start with than the charity mugger, before we even get into the question of the general wrongness of inflicting traumatic experiences that are going to that are going to scar people, that having introducing the sense of chaos into their lives, that you can say that people have a general moral right to a certain kind of order and predictability in their lives that is actually very much like the general in principle rights that they have to things like healthcare and education. And if the money is left in the hands of Jeff Bezos and not taxed away to pay for those other things, it violates the second set of rights. If our system for doing it is street level vigilantism, rather than the orderly, predictable processes of a democratic government, that violates the first right.
Right. So, I mean, part of what's going on is I think you might be appealing to rural utilitarianism rather than, or sort of like rural consequentialism rather than act consequentialism. And I was thinking in the act consequentialist way. In other words, I'm thinking if I go out and mug someone, that's not going to undermine social order. And then I'll take that money and it'll do a lot of good when I give it to the most effective charities. I think maybe you're saying, oh, but if a whole bunch of people, like if we have a general rule that just like everybody does that, then that's going to have bad consequences. Now, is that right?
No. So I think that on an individual level, on a case-by-case level, and again, they have, I'm not a act utilitarian, rule utilitarian, or any kind of utilitarian, but like almost everybody, at least if they're being honest, I do think that when there's no principled reason to do something or not to do something, consequentialist reasons do have their place. And I think that when it comes to this particular consequentialist reason, I absolutely think that it applies on a case-by-case level. I mean, anybody who's ever been robbed, whether at knife point, by a mugger, or even by like a home invader who came in without waking them up, knows that it's a terrifying experience that introduces a sense of chaos into your life, makes you feel powerless, has all sorts of bad consequences. And I believe that those bad consequences and that general sense that people have a right to security, to predictability, to know, whether they're going to be able to have some possession in the future, that those are precisely the considerations, and certainly not anything remotely resembling Lockean property rights ideology that drive our normal common sense moral horror at muggings and home invasions.
Okay, so you appeal to like, oh, so you mug the person on the street and then they feel fear in that moment. I mean, for one thing, I think, yeah, but that fear is going to be so vastly outweighed by the amount of good that money could do. I mean, assuming that I mug a rich person, right? You get enough money to save somebody's life. Fear seems kind of, I don't know, it's, temporary. But anyway, but the other thing is, okay, so let me just, it's like modify it. I should steal the money in a way that won't cause that fear of physical injury, right? So maybe I should hack into people's bank accounts and like take the money out that way, right? And then you said, oh, but there's this unpredictability, so like people won't be able to plan because they won't know when their bank account is going to be hacked into. Okay, so like what if I just do it regularly, right? So like they always know that they're going to get hacked into and I'm going to take the money, right? At a particular time, particular way. And I guess I think most people's reaction would be, well, no, you still can't do that, right?
Yeah, so I think that what I mean, first of all, you're not going to have that kind of predictability and orderliness in theft. Um, you could say, well, if you did, then it would be somewhat less objectionable, and that's certainly true. And if we removed more and more and more of the disanalogies between ordinary street level theft and government taxation, such that, for example, the money in your pocket would have no value if not for the activity of muggers, then mugging would start to seem less and less and less objectionable. But that, to me, doesn't really say anything interesting about the actual moral status of mugging. And I also do want to just step back a little bit to the big picture and note that, since we both have established that we both have exactly the same problem, because on the one hand, if I believe that a retiree has a right to that Social Security income, that they should have it, and it would be morally wrong for it to be kept in the hands of the person who is being taxed to pay for it. That it would be that would violate their rights. But yet, I don't think, I mean, maybe you could convince me for Bezos, but, I don't think that, that when it comes to a middle income person, it would be morally right to mug them. Well, you've got the exactly parallel problem about the public school teacher and the firefighter or the artist living off of a national endowment for the arts grant. And it seems to me that that in our answers, I've given what strike me at least as some pretty clear disanalogies between mugging and taxation, whereas all you've really said about why it's wrong to take away for the private sector taxpayer to mug the school teacher or firefighter is that, well, there should be school teachers or firefighters, which I'm not sure how relevant that is. I mean, if a thief gives money to someone and they say, hey, just so you know, this is stolen property, but I want you to use it to start a school, and then you catch up to them that person 6 blocks later and say, sorry, that's mine, and you have to give it back, and you non-consensually take it back from them. Presumably, we would all be fine with that, even though starting a school is a social function that we think should exist. So that doesn't really seem like a disanalogy. We got that the intuition gets weaker the more steps of the economy we go through, but that's not really a disanalogy, because in this case, it's gone through exactly one step, right? Thief to person knowingly receiving stolen property. And we've got, well, if the floodgates would really be opened if we allowed for that, which seems to heighten your problem, not reduce it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the main point that I wanted to make was kind of about, I don't know why the government is special. And I kind of feel like that wasn't exactly answered. So I think that your view depends upon the idea that the people the government is giving the money to are actually owed that money. Like the people who are getting the Social Security. Okay, but the thing is, like, I think to justify taxation, I think you need to claim that you actually owe the government the precise amount that the IRS says. I don't see how there's no way that's going to come out of a theory of justice, right? Like, I mean, so, maybe if we were in an ideal world, if we were in a world where there's like the Rawlsian government that's actually doing what they're supposed to do, right? But I don't see how that's going to come out for anyone in the real world, that you actually owe the actual amount that the government says, right? And when I said that a lot of the stuff they're doing is unjustified, I didn't just mean social welfare programs. I think there's a bunch of stuff that you would think is unjustified, right? Like, I think I haven't looked up the military budget lately, okay, but when I did, it was the largest in the world by like a factor of 6. It was like 6 times larger than in the United States, 6 times larger than the number 2 military spender or something like that, right? So I would assume that you would think that most of that's unjustified, right? there's just like a ton of this other stuff, right? And there's like, okay, they're giving big subsidies to big corporations, whatever. And okay, so and then there's a bunch of stuff that we would disagree about whether it's justified, right? But then I kind of think like, there's no way that they're justified in taking this money unless you think that they have this kind of special authority where like they have the right to just decide what everybody has to do, right? And then, and even if they're wrong, right?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple different things going on there. By the way, James, just so I have a sense, how long do we have left here? I want to make sure I'm not.
In terms of the intervals or in terms of the 30-minute section?
Well, in terms of the intervals, we just started, but in terms of the 30-minute section.
20 minutes.
Huh?
I think we're at 20 out of 30.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, great, got plenty of time. Yeah, so I think that there are two things going on there. One is even if some taxation, it's justified to pay taxation to pay for healthcare and education is justified, taxation to pay for the Pentagon could still be unjustified, which I completely agree with, of course. But I'm not sure about the relevance because if the issue is whether any sort of taxation is justified, say, well, not all taxation that currently exists is justified. Yeah, fair enough. Some of it is, some of it isn't. It's a necessary condition for something to be a justified taxation that it's a just use of it. It's certainly. I think that thinking about the charity mugger, it's not a sufficient condition. I would argue that there is something special about government in the sense that it is morally preferable to have the system for those transfers be the system for enforcing whichever property rights you believe in, right? Be having a orderly, predictable system, preferably one that we all have democratic input into, rather than having it be something much more haphazard and chaotic. I would say the same thing, by the way, for recovering stolen property. That I want to live in a world where the system for recovering stolen property, if it's not just a matter of like grabbing the mugger's shoulder and yanking it back, is one where you have lawful government functions for doing that, rather than that, like, okay, here's the compound where they're keeping it, let's get together a private militia and storm it. I think it's generally good to have that be done by government rather than done by vigilantes. And by the way, in the case that you're saying, yeah, okay, but you'd have this overwhelming consequentialist reason to do the charity mugger, when you're saving somebody's life, I think by your own account, you're going to say that the charity mugger is justified there too, or at least that's what you strongly suggested at the end of your statement. Finally, I just wanted to say on this question about okay, is the amount that's being taxed precisely the amount that should be taxed and all of that? I also think this is a case where you're going to have a parallel problem, because if you're going to say, well, I have some lock-in theory of property rights, that you have a right to whatever you have, as long as you can trace it back through some series of free market interactions to a just act of original acquisition where you're mixing your labor with the world or something like that, then of course, look, the economic history of the real world bears almost no resemblance to that story. You're absolutely, nobody is going to be able to trace 100% of their income or anything close to it back to a pristine Lockean story like that. But if you think that that rights to current property can be justified by having some vague resemblance, or there's enough of a resemblance to that kind of Lockean justification, I don't see the disanalogy between that and saying that taxation, can be justified even if the precise amount being taxed isn't exactly, what it should have on the basis of some well thought out moral theory.
Okay. So, okay, so a few things. So I agree that it's better to have an orderly system than to have a disorderly system, other things being equal. Yeah, my actual view is I'm an anarcho-capitalist. We're not going to be able to, like get into that. Right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to be able to convince you of that, okay? But I'm just going to say, like in my view, there is a way of doing it in an orderly way, but without, without the taxation, right? And we could enforce property rights without having a central authority, or so I claim. My point about when I was saying, some of the taxation is, even you would agree, is unjustified, like including on the Pentagon. Well, I mean, I was thinking it's not just a little bit. I was thinking like on a reasonable view, even a reasonable leftist view, it's going to turn out that most of what the government is doing is not really justified, right? So, like depending on, that's not a small part of the budget. And then there's like interest on the national debt is another big part. Now you might think, oh, but like there's all these social welfare programs that are pretty big that you like. But I actually think that if you believe in that, like they shouldn't even be doing what they're doing. If you believe in social welfare programs, they should be sending it all to the third world. And like, so I think, I think even that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're definitely not, maximizing the welfare of the least advantaged or whatever. All right, so anyway, so, I mean, you could have a debate about like, okay, what's the outcome if we agree that some taxation is unjustified and some is justified? Like, does that mean the generic statement taxation is theft is right or not? I don't know. But like, I think it's the majority. Anyway, what about, so when I say that charity mugging is justified, generally not. So I do believe in, so like when you see the child drowning in the pond, I believe you have to pull the child out of the pond. Also, I think if there's a third party who is standing by the pond and for some reason you can't pull the child out of the pond, the drowning child, whatever, but you can force another person to pull the child out of the pond, you should force them, right? I guess that's right. Okay, but it doesn't seem to me like you can just like steal people's money in order to give it to a charity organization in general, like, to deal with this just chronic ongoing problem of poverty. Now, I did discuss that in my book, in The Problem of Political Authority at greater length. And I don't, like, as in many cases, it's not obvious what exactly is the difference between different cases. So, like, you can make some suggestions, but it's not obvious what is driving our intuitions. But I tend to go with go with the intuitions anyway. If you're going to draw an analogy, like, so taxing people in order to give it to the poor, is that more similar to stealing money from, like me stealing money from people in order to give it to a charity organization, or is it more similar to me forcing someone to pull the child out of the pond? It looks like it's more similar to the first case, right? So it is like, I've got this ongoing program of coercion. It's to address our chronic social problem, which is not going to be solved, but it's only going to be slightly ameliorated. And the child in the pond, it's like it's only an acute emergency. I'm going to do this one time and it's going to be over. Other related question is, by the way, what if the guy you're trying to force, we want to force the guy to pull the child out of the pond? What if he doesn't do it? Can you then shoot him? So I think the answer to that is no, right? Okay, can you then not shoot him, but do something super unpleasant to him? I think probably not, right? So I think you can threaten to do something super unpleasant, but if he calls your bluff, you probably can't actually do it, right? You can point the gun at the guy and say, save that child, but if he refuses, you can't then shoot him, right? Is what I think. Okay, there were enough different things that came up that I think I've forgotten some of them, so I'm not sure I've addressed everything they wanted to say.
Okay, well, just real quickly, I think the one thing that came up that I haven't really heard a response to is that it seemed to me that I was arguing that none of the analogies that you were drawing to explain why it is that on your view that taxation is theft, robbing a public school teacher or a firefighter wouldn't count as recovering stolen property. that, you know, I kind of went through a list of objections to the things that you said would be differences between the cases, and I don't think we've really gotten a response to any of those.
Okay, so I might have forgotten.
Give you a chance to respond to those, and then we're pretty much at the end of the open dialogue. So we'll give you a chance to respond to the questions, but just want to let you know.
I mean, I remember, you know, one of the things you said is, well, it's only one step. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really that clear to me, you know, like that you can rob Tony Soprano's dry cleaner. Another thing you said was, oh, but, you know, the dry cleaner isn't getting 100% of their income from criminals. Yeah, but like, that's why I said you're only taking the amount that Tony Soprano gave them, right? And,
Well, but
and my thought was like that, it seems kind of unfair because like, you know, like you can take the money before Tony Soprano gives it to them, but like, if you take it afterwards, then you know, like they were forced to provide the service. Like they provide a service and then, you know, and then they didn't get the money, right? Because he stole it from them, right? So I thought, you know, right, but I'm not really sure exactly why, but it seems a little shady.
So if I steal your TV and I give it to James in exchange for some sort of service that he provides to me, you know, I say, James, if you make me a real nice cup of coffee, I'll give you Michael's TV, and I do. He knows that it's a stolen TV in this analogy. He is perfectly aware of that. I give him the TV, and you come around the next day. You would or you wouldn't have a right to take it back.
Yeah, no, I can take the TV, okay, but I don't think that I can just like take money out of the cash register. Right, so like, I mean, one thing is like, I can't say that specific money, like, I don't know, well, that's specific money, but
I mean, the case,
so, you know, like
as a public school teacher, you do know that specific money is derived from taxation because 100% of their money is, and they knew it when they took it.
Well, I mean, I was partly thinking, you know, if it weren't for the, you know, incorrect government laws, they would be funded. Like there would be school teachers, and so that person very likely would still be working as a school teacher, and they'd be getting paid by, you know, parents. So like, I was kind of thinking like, well, some of it's legitimate, right? Because like some of it, you know, is actually coming from the people who are benefiting from it, and like they actually want it. Like, but I'm not really sure about that.
Although that's also not a disanalogy to the charity mugger, you know, that who's doing things that genuinely benefit the people that he's stealing from. And of course, you know, you could have, look, I mean, somebody's private schools already exist. You know, this is a person who, if you think taxation is theft, they made a conscious decision not to go to work for a private school. They made a conscious decision to go to work for an organization that is, by your lights,
I don't think this is
entirely funded by theft.
I mean, I think that sort of like the government has distorted the market in a way that sort of makes those decisions. It's not completely their fault, right? It's like they haven't exactly made it illegal. Like they haven't made it illegal to work for a private school, but they did it a lot harder, right? And they've done it by coercive means. So like I'm not so much blaming the school teachers for working through public school, right? And I better not, because I work for a state school.
Yeah, I think you have a problem explaining why people can't steal from you.
Maybe I'm biased because I work at the University of Colorado or whatever. But you know, probably, like part of my rationalization is, well, there would still be universities in the just libertarian society, and it's just like the government has done this coercive stuff that makes it just a lot harder for a private university, you know, to compete.
I don't think that people should mug you, but then again, I don't think taxation is theft, so I don't think that taking your wallet would be recovering stolen property. I'm not sure that it makes sense to say that it's not.
I mean, I think like even on your view, I don't think you would say that if somebody is stolen from you, that you personally should go over there and forcibly take it back, right?
No, but that's because I think that there's a distinction in principle between vigilantism and government action, but the denial of the moral importance of that distinction is actually central to your argument.
Well, no, I mean, taxation could be theft, but you could still make that distinction, right? Like, you could say it's theft, but still not agree with vigilantism, right?
No, but but the point is that like your starting point, right? Your original argument is that there is no difference in principle between street level theft and government taxation. It's not special because the government does it. And if that distinction is not a morally important one, then I have a hard time seeing why I say, well, no, you can't use vigilantism to get back the money. That would be bad in ways that some other remedies, would be. Whereas from my perspective, since I do think that there's a morally important distinction between government taxation and that it actually it is morally significant whether the government is doing it or not.
But
I don't have that.
We'll give you a quick chance to respond, Dr. Huemer, and then we got to jump into the Q&A for sure, as we're a few minutes.
I'm not exactly getting how this is a good argument from your point of view. It seems like you think that you can't do vigilante activity even if someone did steal from you. And so then the fact that you can't do the vigilante activity against the government employees, that doesn't show that the money wasn't stolen. Because if it was, you would still say that you can't do it, right?
Well, I think that the way that you should get stolen money back is through the state, because I think that the state action is preferable to vigilante action. But my question is, from your point of view, given that you think that the public employee is knowingly accepting stolen property and that the private sector taxpayer mugging them can be absolutely certain that every dollar that they're mugging is derived from theft, and they were one of the people who were stolen from, I think that I still don't really see how you're getting around saying that this is a justified act of recovering stolen property, which in turn I think undermines the claim that this is just common sense morality.
If you have
we both don't see how the other one's view, how the argument. Yeah, okay. We're both trying to evaluate the argument from the other one's point of view. So, anyway,
you got it. Do you feel good on that? I don't want to rush you.
So we're supposed to go to a Q&A from viewers or something?
That's right. And so thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been so much. There's tons of positive feedback. People are really enjoying this. So thank you. I want to remind you, folks, our guests are linked in the description. So what are you waiting for? You can hear and read more from those links of our guests in the description box below. We're going to jump into this first question from SOD. Thanks for your question. Said, you cannot confer. I think this is for you, Ben. They said, you cannot confer a right that you don't have to someone else, individually or collectively. No individual has the right to take something that they do not own. We'll give you a chance to respond to that comment.
Yeah, no one has a right to take something that they don't own is ambiguous. Again, does own mean is currently in possession of? In that case, nobody believes that no one ever has a right to take something that someone else is currently in possession of or recovering stolen property would be wrong. Does it mean that nobody has a right to take something that legally someone else is the possessor of? Well, I don't think a libertarian can say that, for reasons that I've argued earlier. So what we're left with is interpretations of that statement that no one has a right to say, so take something I don't own, is no one has a right to take something that someone else has a superior moral right to, which has the virtue of being true, but it's also completely vacuous because it's circular.
Gotcha. And this one comes in from SOD again, says, accepting Ben's premise that the IRS owns the money still doesn't allow the IRS to use that money for anything without your consent, which would be akin to a board member using corporate funds without board approval, which is theft.
That seems kind of confused because it sounds to me like the questioner wants to have it both ways. Either that they're, on the one hand, they want to grant me for the sake of argument my assumption that, for example, retirees living off Social Security do have a right to that Social Security income, and so it's legitimate, therefore, for the state to act on their behalf and deliver it to them. And on the other hand, it sounds like they want to they want to still insist that somehow in that scenario, the person who is taxed to pay for it has a moral right to it, but that's exactly the issue in dispute.
Gotcha. And then Legend Rivs says, coming after you, Dr. Burgess, says, is discriminating against rich people through taxation right? Why should my money get wasted on the national healthcare fraud of September 30th, 2020?
Good question.
Wait. Okay, I think there's like some sort of reference there that I'm not following. Maybe maybe somebody can clarify to me what that September 30th business is about. But I think that if the question, if I'm correctly understanding, that what they're asking about is why is it right to pay for somebody for universal healthcare program? You know, why would that be morally right? If that's the question, then I'd say that
just a quick add. The first part they said it is discriminating against the rich people through taxation, right? So I think they mean in terms of the varying levels of who is taxed what, and then they had asked why should my money get wasted on the national healthcare fraud.
Oh yeah, sure. So let's take the first part first. That yes, it is right that people who have more money are taxed at a higher level than people who have less money. I actually have a really hard time imagining anybody who thought that taxation was justified not believing that further premise. I know that there are people who have that combination of views, that taxation isn't theft, but we should have a flat tax, but I don't really understand how that works. It seems to me that if you think that it is generally justifiable to have social programs that are free at the point of service, that are funded by taxation, then that it would be much more just to tax people with more money at higher levels because they'll still be left with more because they're going to take less of a hit in terms of their own lifestyle due to diminishing marginal utility. That, you know, all of that seems totally straightforward to me. I would also add, it's a much spicier take, of course, you know, because so far everything I've said in this debate is would, you know, not neutral ground between me and Michael Huemer, of course, but it would be neutral ground between me and, like, you know, a much more moderate sort of progressive than I am. But I also think that an extra reason why very rich people it's justifiable to tax at a higher rate is that they got that money from workers who are creating labor, which are creating value in ways that they would not have agreed to if not for wildly unequal bargaining positions, and that is an extra justification.
That will be a question for me.
But real quickly on the second half of the question, right? Why is it right that it's justifiable to take his money to pay for national health care? Because if he was behind the veil of ignorance, he knew he had to design a society. He knew he'd have to live in it, and he didn't know whether he was, what his position would be in that society. He would absolutely opt to have a taxpayer funded, free at the point of service system of national health care because the outcomes are vastly better than private health care. Look at the World Health Organization rankings. Because many fewer people would avoidably die, because it gives us much more
Gotcha.
freedom.
We must. I hate to rush you, but
etc.
Next up, this one from SOD says fencing is a criminal activity as well. Selling the use of one person's tax revenue for votes from another person doesn't make it moral.
I feel bad for Michael.
Are there any questions for me?
I know.
I feel left out here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let me just double check to see if there are any that. Oh, we do have one. Let's see. We have a challenge where there are a lot of for Ben, but let me jump to this one that has. It's for both of you. They said, "Hi James, for both speakers. Comparative to taxes, do you consider profit to be theft, especially considering the growing wealth gap?" Go with you first, Dr. Michael Huemer.
No, I don't consider profit. Well, wait. I mean, that was a really broad statement. Like, all profit? Would I consider all profit to be theft? No, of course not. Like that. Wait a minute. then you couldn't do anything, right? And you couldn't live, right? So, but okay. So, I mean, I think I have different factual beliefs from, socialists, and it's not just that I have different values, I have different factual beliefs. So I think that the reason why in the market economy, the reason why rich people are getting rich is mostly that they're providing a lot of value. So yeah, they have like $1 million profit. I think basically, roughly, they provide about $1 million of value to the rest of society. That's why they got paid $1 million. And so I don't really see the problem. There's growing inequality. I don't think that's necessarily bad. So it could be bad. It depends upon how it came about. I don't think inequality by itself is bad. I do think it's bad if there are people who are unable to meet their basic needs. That's bad. I don't think it's just inherently bad that people have different amounts.
Gotcha. Then Ben, do you have a quick pithy response to the question as well? Otherwise, we'll jump to the next one, which
yeah,
for you.
I do. I think that if profit doesn't just mean the colloquial thing that you have more money than you started with, but is profit derived from your position as the owner of a business? I do think that there is a general case for saying that that's illegitimate, and so if you want to if you want to talk this way, that it's theft for reasons that oddly enough sort of mirror what Michael said about his justification for working at a public university, that there are various historical injustices that change the balance of forces on the ground to give some people vastly more bargaining power over others. They can use this structural position of power to extract what they would never be able to get freely. And I also think inequality is bad for a bunch of other reasons, but since this wasn't even my question, we'll save that for later maybe.
Gotcha. This one, Cameron Roberts, thanks for your question for Dr. Huemer. They said, how do you define quote unquote voluntary? Is rent voluntary? Is wage labor voluntary? Even if essentials of life are withheld from you if you don't?
Basically, yes. So, I mean, the first part of it is, how do I define voluntary? And I mean, in philosophy, you can't really define anything. Like whenever you give a definition, there's always counterexamples and so on. Okay, so I'm not going to give a precise definition, but I mean, it does have to do with you're making an informed choice, and nobody coerced you. Like they didn't threaten to do violence to you or whatever. Now, you might say, oh, but you could be coerced if you needed a particular thing, and like the other person demanded, okay, so like you need money to live in our society or to live decently, and so you're coerced to take a job, right? And I don't really think of that as coercion. Here's an example I like to give. So you go to a doctor and you've been diagnosed with cancer, and they offer to do a surgery, and you're going to have to pay some amount of money. Okay, so whatever, maybe there's a copay or whatever, so it's going to be kind of a lot of money. And then you got to sign this form, and then you get the surgery. Okay, now, side point, there's a fucked up part where they don't even tell you how much it's going to be until afterwards. Okay, so that's fucked up. They should have to tell you. But anyway, okay, but let's say they actually told you the amount before, and then you sign. Is that a valid agreement? Now I think yes. And I don't think this is an extreme libertarian view of mine. Like, I think this is the standard orthodox view. That's valid, even though you are going to die if you didn't get the surgery. And so why? Well, it doesn't count as coercion because the surgeon didn't give you the cancer. So like if he said, I'm going to give you cancer unless you sign this form, that's coerced, or it's not voluntary. But if you already had it and he just said, I'm going to solve the problem if you sign this, I think that counts, right? And so I think that's analogous to when the employer says, okay, you need money. I'm going to give you some money if you do this thing. Sign here. Then you sign there.
You got it. Thanks very much. And then this one coming in from SOD for Ben, they say, saying that taxing property precludes taxation being theft because taxing it is legal is essentially saying that anything the government makes legal cannot be a violation of one's rights.
Yeah, but of course that's not anything that I said or hinted at or believe. What I said was that various people, Dr. Huemer here and others, have said that taxation is wrong because you're taking away something that belongs to you. And I've said that what I said is that is equivocal. What does it mean for it to belong to you? That's very unclear what it means. There are three possible interpretations. Maybe there's a fourth, and I'm not being imaginative enough. But the three possible interpretations I can make sense of are: one, something that's currently in your possession. Can't be that, because then recovered stolen property would be theft. Another one is that it's something that you have a moral right to, even if it's a defeasible moral right, but then that would be circular, as we keep talking about. And in the middle, a possible interpretation I offered on behalf of the libertarian who makes that claim is that it could just mean that like it legally belongs to you, but they can't say that because if that's what they were saying, then taxation couldn't be theft. So that's the context. That's the only context actually, which I brought up the the problem with saying that taxation is theft because it's legal. It's if hypothetically your view, what you meant by property is property that's legally yours as opposed to property that's morally yours or property that you're currently in possession of. I don't think any of those three issues work. And of course, I don't think
just because
that nothing could
just
be
because
wrong if it's legal. Lots of stuff is
we
legal.
Is it okay if I comment on that?
Go for it.
Because I wanted to respond to this point about, sort of the circularity, and I forgot to respond during my rebuttal. But so actually, I don't think that it's circular, even though property does have a normative meaning, or I don't think it's objectionably circular. But so, imagine a thing where, you ask, hey, why is Bob a bad person? And then I say, well, he's cowardly and he's dishonest and whatever. Okay, and those terms are normative. But it's not the case that it wasn't explanatory. It was explained. So one way of explaining
I'm sorry,
why something is the case is,
I think I just missed. Sorry.
Yeah. So Bob. I think Bob is a bad person. You ask why, and I say, well, he's cowardly. Okay, and cowardly is a normative term. So does that mean I gave a circular explanation, right? Like it means something like bad in a certain way. And I think no. So I think it can be a good explanation of why something is bad to use a concept that entails bad, but it can be explanatory because it's bad in a specific way. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I just say that the disanalogy is we can paraphrase cowardly in a way that takes away the normative part, and it still functions as an explanation of why you think that Bob is bad. And I don't see the analogy for taxation is wrong because it's theft.
Well, somebody could give a description of when they think somebody owns property. They could give the descriptor properties that they think lead to property rights, right? Well, maybe they could. Maybe it's too complicated, but also maybe it's too complicated to give the descriptive definition of what you have to do to be courageous, right? So. And I think that's about equally plausible. So it might be that actually you kind of have to use the normative judgment in order to capture all of the behavior patterns that count as cowardly. But it's still explanatory, right?
Yeah, I think you're saying, Bob. I think Bob is a bad person because he's a coward, and then you can do the further thing and explain what makes Bob a coward without invoking the fact that in some more general sense he's a bad person. Whereas the disanalogy I'd say is if you say taxation is wrong because it's theft, well, the question of whether it's theft hinges on whether it's wrong in a way that whether Bob is a coward doesn't hinge on whether he's a bad person.
I think it would hinge on whether the stuff that he did that I said was cowardly was actually, unvirtuous or morally bad or something like that, right?
Sure, but that might be normative, but it doesn't take us back to where we started with Bob as a bad person. It doesn't rely on the initial judgment, that Bob is a bad person. Whereas saying that, so you have Bob is a bad person because he's cowardly, and maybe we introduce some other normative stuff, but that doesn't mean we've gone back to Bob is a bad person in a way that when you say taxation is wrong because it's theft, you've gone right back to it's wrong because part of what it means to be theft, it's not just that it has a normative component that that's fine. It's that that normative component takes us right back to where we started.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the difference at all. I think so. I think cowardly implies bad at least bad in a respect. So, I don't think that's different from, the way that property implies how to write to it or something.
But
I think we might be spending too much time on it.
He's not a coward.
Really quick, pithy response, Ben, and then we're going to jump to the next one.
He's not a coward because he's a bad person. whereas it would be theft because you don't have a right to take it, which is why it can't ground it being something you don't have a right to take.
This one coming in from Parhesia, thanks for your question, said, how is tax to fund libraries morally justified when that money could be used to prevent the starvation of children in developing countries instead?
Yeah, I mean, so then we're having an argument about priorities for taxes, and I'm perfectly happy to have that argument. But that seems to be a slightly different thing from is taxation justified, and if we made it far enough down our list of priorities that we got here, would a justifiable purpose of it be to fund public library?
I mean, by the way, like, I would be way more happy with taxation if it was actually going to feed starving children in the third world. Like, then I would have a hard time deciding whether it was okay or not. And be like, yeah, maybe that's okay.
This one coming in from SOD says, money does not have to be taxed to have value. Even prisons and school cafeterias have ersatz currencies.
Yeah, those currencies are not going to have the value the government-backed currency is going to.
This one coming in from Bubble Gum Gun says, Ben, crypto and gold don't need government.
I think that if you think that there's any conceivable world where crypto would function as a repository value that would be anything like as reliable as government-backed currency, where we would have anything resembling a functioning economy with only crypto, then we just have a very deep factual disagreement.
Dr. Huemer?
I love Bitcoin.
I was going to ask if you weren't going to say.
Yes, we have a deep factual disagreement. Let's just agree on that.
You got it. And SOD, thanks for your other question, said, the mob providing protection in a racket also regularly takes dues. It still comes with the threat of violence from non-compliance. Regularity and stability do not preclude theft.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just factually extremely wrong to say that you can have anything remotely approaching the degree of regularity and predictability with mob protection rackets that you have with government taxation. Again, and this takes us right back to the factual disagreement we have. For it to be analogous, it would have to be the case that if the mob protection racket didn't exist, it would be impossible to have anything that the mob would want to extort in the first place. It would have to be the case that as the entire time you're planning to open up this deli, it was always part of your plan that the mob would extort it, and you know exactly which mafia family would be extorting it, and that you would have and that you knew that mafia family would be extorting it realistically for the entire time your business was going to be in operation, that you were counting on it. And that doesn't even get into the range of disanalogies, which, to be fair, we haven't really talked to about what I would see as the extreme moral importance of democratic input.
Gotcha. And this one, interesting for Dr. Huemer, they said, who and how should determine how the big fees should be in the user fee model that you mentioned in your opening?
Oh, how would they determine? I mean, as a question about justice, they could determine it however they want, right? In other words, if you're charging a fee for a service, you have the right to make the fee whatever you want. Now, that doesn't mean that you should just do anything, but okay, so what would be the smart thing to do? They would think about how much it was worth. They would try to bring in as much money as they could, I guess. That's what businesses do. So I guess it would be okay for the government to do that. They might consider, so when they consider how much it's worth to you, maybe they could also consider how much you would be willing to pay. I guess that's the same thing. Right? It's not unreasonable that they could charge different amounts to different people, right? Like if you've got more property, they might say, yeah, we're going to charge you more for protection because you got more stuff to protect or whatever. So it would be okay. So I don't know if this is what the question we're getting at, but I think it would be okay to have, different amounts of fees for people with different amounts of money.
You bet. And this one, thanks very much for your question. Tugboat 2030 says, to Dr. Huemer, was World War II worth fighting for from taxation, or should we have voluntarily asked for donations? I think that they're asking, well,
Yeah.
and then
No, yeah,
they
good
said, how
question.
about
I
the
mean-
Revolutionary War as well?
I mean, in my view, so I'm not an absolutist, so I don't think property rights are absolutes. I think it can be overridden if there's an emergency. I think you could make the argument. So if we knew that the Holocaust was going to happen, then, you know, we had a good reason for intervening. I don't think that we actually knew that at the time that we entered the war. So, and it might have been that, like, we weren't justified based on the information we had, but we were justified, like, based upon what was actually going on. So I think it could be okay to coerce people in a way that would normally violate their rights if you're, like, trying to stop a genocide of, like, millions of people.
You got it. And this one for you, Dr. Huemer, as well. I'm not sure what this acronym or what this means exactly. Let me pull this back up. They had said in POPA chapter, I think it's
Problem
chapter
of political authority.
Okay, thank you. At chapter 7.2, they said, you were undecided about equivalence of isolated theft to save one's own life and expropriation programs for effective life-saving charity. Have you decided now?
Not really. Right. So, like, I made a comment earlier in this Q&A that if the government were stealing money, so it would still be stealing, they were stealing money and they were giving it to the most effective charities, right? And so, like, you know, they could be saving millions of lives every year. Then I think maybe that would be okay. Like, I'm not sure, but I think it's not justified when they're not doing it. They're not even coming anywhere close.
You got it. And this one from John Van Divier, thank you for your question, said, you guys, one of you or both of you might be able to identify what their point is and who this is for. They had said, please note robust political economy, the idea that public decisions are generally suspect due to knowledge and moral hazard considerations.
Oh, that's definitely for me. That's a libertarian.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think that you know, I don't accept the factual premise would be the pithiest way to say it. To be just a touch less pithy. I think if we I think sort of abstract principles about what we expect according to some predictive model from private decision makers versus, you know, collective democratic decision makers aren't actually going to take us very far in the real world. I would point to things that I said earlier about, for example, the many advantages to human flourishing, saving lives, and meaningful human freedom of having universal health care as an obvious case. By the way, just real quickly, I would also be curious, just to follow up on the earlier question. We talked about the World War II, but how about the Civil War, which was the one that it was the first time we had federal income taxes to pay for that, and there's no knowledge problem there, right? I mean, the Southern states seceded in order to preserve slavery by their own account. So I would be curious about whether that taxation was justified on Dr. Huemer's view.
Probably not. Well, but I mean, but not just because if it was only that we were spending money and then we're ending slavery, that would be justified. But it was also, like, you know, so many people getting killed, right? And it wasn't that, you know, it's not like, oh, that we would have slavery forever, because, like, no country in the world, like, slavery is illegal everywhere in the world now, so it would still be illegal today if we hadn't had the Civil War. It just would have taken longer. So was it justified to kill all those people? I mean, I don't know, but probably not.
Gotcha. This one's an interesting one. Ben, what are your thoughts on this? Is ASEAN, do appreciate your question. They said, I think some taxes are reprehensible, such as on food or shelter or water or heat or cooling and clothing. Do you have any sort of, like, qualifications or unique feelings for those taxes, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess we'd have to dig in a little bit more to know exactly what kind of taxes the you know, the questioner had in mind. Do we mean like sales taxes when you purchase those things, or or do we mean some other kind of taxes? If we do mean sales taxes to purchase those things, then I can see an argument being raised that if the effect of those sales taxes was to make it, harder to, to afford those things, that would certainly be a moral objection to that. In general, I like income taxes way more than sales taxes, precisely because I do want to discriminate against the rich, as a previous questioner put it, by charging people higher rates as we go up in the income scale, and sales taxes are flat taxes, which I think is structurally unfair to lower income people.
Gotcha. And this one from Brian, I'm not exactly sure, maybe both of you want to respond. They said, property is a corollary of causality. Somebody chose to take an action, and they, in order to survive, must be entitled to the effects of that action. Without a valid definition of property, all we have is luck and conquest.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, this gets a thing that I think is important about property, which is, okay, in my view, like I was saying, a little earlier in the Q&A, the main reason why people in the market economy get money is that they produce an amount of value that's, roughly proportional to the amount of money that they receive. It's not always the case. There could be cases where you're cheating people and whatever. But I think it's sort of like, by and large, roughly how it is. And so because you produce the value, it seems to me like it's kind of fair that you get about that amount of value in return.
You got it. Thanks very much. And this one coming in from Michael Lyon says, taking from another without consent is violence. How is taxation any different? I guess this is probably, you felt like you've adequately covered this, Ben, in the earlier parts of the debate.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. And then this one coming in.
Actually, sorry, can I just add 2 sentences to what I said earlier? Because I think that the specific invocation of violence is an important thing, because no libertarian theory of property rights is really about violence. Violence is a red herring. It's, because whether we're violently enforcing property rights that people already have, like using threats of violence to drive someone off your property, if you're not prepared to do that, the property claim isn't worth much. Or you're using the much milder and much more abstract and indirect and less likely to be carried out threat of violence to enforce redistributive taxation. You're still using violence. So the question isn't violence or nonviolence. The question is, which distribution of resources are we enforcing?
Gotcha. I'm curious to hear both your thoughts on this one. This is John. Appreciate your question. Said, if forcibly taxing 100% of my income makes me a slave, at what percentage am I no longer a slave?
0%. That was an easy answer. Whew, easy question.
I think that my answer, the antecedent is false. If 100% of your income is taxed and that income wasn't generated in some horrendously unjustified way, then you have a legitimate complaint, but that legitimate complaint doesn't add up to enslavement. I think that equating unjust expropriation of goods with slavery really, really, really undersells the many and extreme ways in which slavery is morally wrong, most of which are not captured by that.
You got it. And Brian F., thanks for your question. Want to let you know, folks, we totally have no more time for any additional questions. We've got just several more, and we'll actually, we want to wrap up and want to ask this question from Brian F., who said, should lazy people be able to force others to provide housing and food for them? Can you both agree some taxes are theft?
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think some taxes are unjustified. I think Michael actually named some purposes for which taxation shouldn't exist, because the purposes themselves shouldn't exist earlier, like waging imperialist wars. I don't think that providing food and housing are on that list. I think everybody, by virtue of being a human being, has a right to things like healthcare and education and housing, and the idea that we should let people, that we should let people go without those things because in our judgment they're lazy has very, let's put it this way, it doesn't even begin to tempt my moral intuitions.
I'm very tempted, but I mean, let me say, it's not. I don't think of it as a retributive point. It's not like, oh, I think you're bad, so. It's more like, So, when the questioner says, "Oh, they're lazy," I take it that they mean the person can get the money. If we don't give it to them, they can get it. They could just go find a job and they get enough money to survive. They just don't want to. And I think, no, screw them. Make them go to work.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
This last one from Sphincter of Doom. Thanks for your question. Says the WHO, the World Health Organization ranking for healthcare is largely useless when it puts South Korea below the US, despite it being the best performing single payer system and happens to be the least publicly funded one.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that I think that the fact that the questioner thinks that South Korea is in the wrong spot gives me very little confidence that they know better than the WHO does. I think if you look at the criteria in terms of things like life expectancy that are factored into the WHO rankings, if you look at things like the actual feelings of the recipients of the healthcare that are factored into those rankings, the idea that this one ranking feels off to me doesn't give me any reason whatsoever, honestly, to think that the questioner's sort of intuitive rankings are better than the World Health Organization rankings.
Gotcha. And want to say, did you have Dr. Huemer? Go ahead if you had something.
I was going to say, I feel similarly. I don't believe what some random person says about some healthcare system in another country, but I also basically don't trust anyone else. I don't trust Ben's judgment about that, and I'm not sure. I don't think I even trust the WHO. But I don't really know. Maybe they're right, but I'm not going to assume that because I just think there's just too much political bias. Whenever people tell me, "Oh, such and such has a great healthcare system," I just totally discount it.
You got it.
I think there are a lot of the things that the WHO uses to determine that I've already mentioned that I think should not be discounted. I think that people live longer. They're less likely to die of preventable diseases. Their children are less likely to die as infants. The people who are receiving the healthcare themselves report better outcomes. So I would strongly dispute that this is a big mistake.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying everything is fucked up, right? But I'm saying it could be easy to skew the overall results. That's a super complicated thing to do, ranking the overall healthcare system. And there've got to be lots and lots of choices that are kind of subjective.
Got it. And want to say, folks, our guests are linked.
There's a general reason to think that look at every country that's adopted a universal.
I do want to, just to respect your guys' time. I'm
even
so sorry.
Parties have to at least pretend to want to keep it.
I do want to. We're basically, folks, I want to encourage you to hear more. I know, folks, you're I know there's more. So I want to encourage you to click on our guest links in the description box. You can hear more. You can read more. We really do appreciate our guests, folks. And so really, I'm sure you do because you've been listening and the feedback has been awesome. So we're so glad you enjoyed it, folks. And please do click on those links in the description box for our guests. And that way you can hear plenty more from them, read plenty more from them. And so thank you very much, Dr. Huemer and Dr. Burgess. It's been a true pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, James.
All right, thanks. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And well, folks, I will be back in just a moment with a post-credit scene letting you know about upcoming juicy debates such as the one on the bottom right of your screen. It's going to be a great one. And so stick around. I'll be right back in just a moment. Thanks again to our guests, and their links are below in the description box.
All right, I think Ben's coming back on in a minute. I'm gonna put the intermission on really fast.
All right, guys. So I have to say this is pretty funny. So at the end of the debate, I was multitasking just a little bit, and I looked at Twitter a couple times, and I saw something there that I at least find very funny, which is this. Well, okay, here's the backstory. So it's the backstory. A couple days ago, the magazine Quillette put out a review of my new book. And so,
You're freezing up, at least on my end.
Figure out exactly.
You're freezing up a bit for a second while you're.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so here's the backstory. All right. So Quillette put out a review of my book by Adam Wakeling, which was actually a pretty good review. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised because I say some pretty mean things about Quillette in the book, but the person they assigned to review it at least has I guess didn't mind that. And so, it was a pretty nice review. I mean, you can tell at a few places. So Quillette is kind of like, it's like IDW-ish. It's not crazy right wing, but it's like sort of like
no, they were set up to be like not necessarily the IDW voice, but to be like the like undermined and like under whatever, like victimized voice of academia or whatever they consider it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, most of what's in Quillette is like culture war stuff from kind of a center-right libertarian-ish kind of perspective. Like, there's lots of sort of look at these crazy SJWs on college campuses kind of material.
Yeah.
They've also, that's like the dominant editorial line of Quillette. They have also published things by leftists a few times. They published a couple, actually, I think several things a couple of years ago by my friend and frequent GTAA guest Matt McManus, and they also published a couple things that I wrote back then. One of the things that I wrote was an article about the Peterson-Zizek debate in 2019. And it was written in this way that was like sort of very careful, like very narrow, because I wanted Quillette to publish this, and I knew they wouldn't if I didn't like make it like a really narrow argument, right? So like the argument of the piece was basically I was just a piece about how Jordan Peterson was exposing at this debate that he didn't know anything about Marx, and so the title of the article is Marx Deserves Better Critics, and the argument of the article is like, look, whether you're somebody who likes Marx like me or you're somebody who doesn't like Marx, we're going to have a way more interesting debate about this stuff if we have somebody in it who, on the anti-Marxist side, who knows more than Peterson does.
Or at least has read more than just the Communist Manifesto before showing up. And
yeah, exactly.
Showing up benzoed out with a bunch of money in their pocket from the debate ticket, the scalping or whatever. And
yeah. So and I talk about this, like I talk about this article in the book, at the bonus essay at the end of the book. And one of the things I say there is that one of the reasons I wrote it, I pitched this article to Quillette and not a magazine more ideologically congenial to me, is that I wanted it to. That is a very good question, Brent. I wanted it to. And yeah, glad to see you were watching that debate just now. But we are going to get back to the debate and do post-game analysis in just a minute. But I do want to finish this thing about Peterson because this is very funny to me. So, what I say in the book, in that bonus essay at the end of the book, is that one of the reasons I pitched to Quillette, not to a magazine that's more politically in my corner, is sure I wanted to reach people who wouldn't read it in Jacobin. But also, I did admit that I had like a really petty reason for putting in Quillette, which is that Jordan Peterson tweets out Quillette articles all the time.
Yeah,
which,
no, the entire IDW did for a little while until Dave Rubin got really butthurt. They lightly criticized him in an op-ed piece.
Yeah, exactly. So I was basically I was hoping that Peterson would read the article and it would piss him off. So that was my petty reason for putting it there. So he didn't read it, or if he did read it, he kept it to himself. But fast forward to a couple days ago, Quillette puts out this review by Adam Wakeling of my book, and it's a good review. Like there are like a few things that he says here and there that are like tells that he's like his politics are very unlike my politics. I don't think Adam Wakeling's a leftist, but he gets what I was trying to do in the book. It's a very positive review. And it has actually some really good lines in it. Like I really like the thing about how let me see if I can find this real quick. Yeah, that how like the sort of pathologies of the left that I'm critiquing in the book are things that really benefit the right. Because it gives them talking points. And so he did have this line in here that I enjoyed. He says it's telling that CPAC 2021 adopted the slogan America Uncanceled rather than say against universal health care or don't increase the minimum wage.
Yeah.
So, I like that. But in any case, so then tonight I saw, I guess he actually tweeted this yesterday, but it wasn't brought to my attention until today. I saw this tweet, which is awesome. So let me just pull this up. So this is Dr. Jordan B. Peterson tweeted out the review of my book, and he says only the best of the left can save us from the worst of the left, and the clock keeps ticking. Which then, so then of course. Not going to let that opportunity go to waste. I tweeted, guessing he hasn't read the book being reviewed. See the screenshots. And I included the screenshots of all the shit that I say about him in the book. But I appreciate the kind words. For the record, happy to debate at Jordan B. Peterson anytime or place on any issue related to the ones I raised about him in the book. I mean, why not debate the best of the left? So, put it out there.
He's gonna show up and be like, listen, I didn't read your book. There's just too many pages, but I reread the Communist Manifesto again last night, and I'm jacked up and I'm ready to debate you.
Anyway, this really, like, to understand why I found this so funny, you have to get that, like, literally since I started doing public-facing political work in 2018, more than like one article in Counterpunch every 6 months or something, like I've been doing for a couple of years before that. But since I started doing what I'm doing, like a huge part of it has been dunking on Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Like I literally met Michael Brooks at a conference that Doug Lane helped organize about Jordan Peterson, the conference in lieu of a debate. I did like a bunch of videos for Zero Books, like debunking Peterson. The first time I was on TMBS in studio, one of the segments, which I did see that somebody helpfully linked to Peterson in the replies to his tweet. It was called "Jordan Peterson Could Red Bait, but Can He Reason?" Anyway. I guess I don't want to be too repetitive, but it made me laugh that Peterson, true to form, did not bother Googling me, and he read this review of my book, or he at least did enough of it to get an idea, and he tweeted it out. So please, I don't normally I don't encourage Twitter pile-ons, but in this particular case, I'm going to make an exception and say, please, if you're watching this. Tweet at Dr. Peterson to ask him, since he has described me as the best of the left, why he won't debate me.
Just turn it into a thing until it happens. No, I don't know. He never will, but
no, he won't. Yeah, he absolutely will not.
I mean, it was interesting that he chose to debate GJAC, and I think it's obviously the amount of positive feedback that he got, and like the dollar signs popping up in his eyes when it comes to like ticket sales and stuff. But
Which,
still,
by the way, in those screenshots that I included in that tweet, that includes me suggesting exactly that, because I said, let me find the line from the book okay, actually, here, let me just do a quick screen share of the part of the book where I say this. I say, here we go, canceling comedians. So here we go. I'm pretty sure that's why he turned down an earlier invitation to debate Richard Wolff. Peterson's response to that invitation, immortalized on YouTube, was to rant and rave about Stalinism, even though Wolff's radically democratic vision of a post-capitalist society is poles apart from the one-party authoritarianism of the old Soviet Union, and to suggest that one, advocating any form of Marxism was morally on par with defending Hitler's, quote, national and socialism, unquote, and that two, such a position was so far outside the boundaries of acceptable discourse that he didn't want to legitimize Wolff by debating him. What makes all of this particularly odd is that Zizek is noticeably less passionate than Wolff is about the importance of democracy. In a thought-provoking lecture entitled A Plea for Bureaucratic Socialism, Zizek points out that if we brought everything under participatory democratic control, we'd have to waste much of our lives in meetings about things like the management of water and electric services that most of us would rather not have to think about at all. He's no more a Stalinist than Wolff is. In fact, he was a democratic dissident in the Communist Party of Slovenia in the 1980s. But where Wolff is a happy warrior for socialism, Zizek is the kind of intellectual who's most comfortable when he's excavating the connections between ideas through layers of irony and ambiguity. So, if the association between Marxism and gulags was too strong for Peterson to be willing to debate Wolff, why did he want to debate Zizek? Part of the answer may be financial. Peterson knew that Zizek was a bigger name and a bigger draw than Wolff. Toronto scalpers were reportedly charging more for tickets to the Zizek-Peterson debate than they did for Maple Leafs tickets, and people around the world paid to see the live stream. While Zizek donated his half of the proceeds to a charity for Indigenous Canadians, Peterson pocketed his. So,
I still remember when that debate was going on, like really easily. You could just find someone else that was like streaming the stream onto like a free video or whatever, and it was like people were paying a lot of money to like stream it, because there were people that were obviously paying money to be there, and I get that, but like there were also, people were paying money to like watch it in real time, but like they also had it on so many channels streaming in real time for free.
Yeah. So anyway, like I said, I believe that true to form, Peterson did not take a look at my book before he tweeted about it, but I'm not holding my breath for it to happen, but I still want I still want everybody to tweet at Peterson and ask him why he's not willing to debate what he's just called the best of the left. So just because it would be, let's put it this way. I don't think that Peterson's going to do it, but how hilarious and awesome would it be if it got to the point where it was like the Dave Rubin, Sam Cedar thing, where it was just
completely, yeah. or like the Sam Cedar, Steven Crowder thing, where
like even Jesse Lee Peterson and what's his name?
Props to Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse Lee Peterson doesn't shy from debating people who are much more like intellectually curious than he is. I'll say, like, you know what I mean? Like he'll debate. I don't know. Jesse Lee Peterson's one of the few people that, I respect the fact that he'll have literally anybody on his show and then kind of just pile on the most inane, weird fucking nonsense of like, I don't know. Like, it's just like, I feel like everybody else on the right that I can think of runs away from anybody that they think would be a real challenge. And, maybe it's the fact that everybody, like every debate for Jesse Lee Peterson is a real challenge, but I don't know.
Yeah, not the way he does it, but yeah, like, I did, I actually did get the Jesse Lee's producer actually did reach out to me a little while back and be like, hey, you want to come back on? And I think,
it was probably great for views for them. Like, I don't think people are like organically watching that show.
Yeah, I don't know who watches it. I don't really have it. I don't feel like I have a good sense of what the average Jesse Lee Peterson viewer is like. But I think that I don't know, maybe he'll do it, but I'm kind of inclined to just let that, like, as funny as it was the one time that I was on before, like, and that's like going to be something that's going to be following me around till I die, you know, I don't know. Yeah, like just like that was just such like as theater, you know, that was so funny. But I don't know that I don't really know that anybody would get much out of it happening again at this point, and especially I don't really want to do it for a like if the book that had just come out was about a different subject, I might do it. But since I'm writing a book critiquing the left, I don't want to be talking about that book on Jesse Lee Peterson. If I go back on Jesse Lee Peterson, I want that to be while I'm talking about something where I'm not being like, yeah, no, we're really screwing up on my side. Here's how we need to do better. I want that to be for something where like I can just yell back, you know, joyfully.
Yeah, I mean, he'll probably be like reach out to you and then be like, hey, you want to discuss like critical race theory? And like,
I do not know.
No, like I don't know. I can't imagine like Jesse Lee Peterson
Don't
inviting
tell me these critical race theory people are beta males, Ben. Yeah,
he's like the perfect like any race-based or class-based like program is racist. Like he's the perfect like person to make like the reverse racism argument, I feel like. And I feel like that's why conservatives always have like, I don't know, they very publicly like tokenize certain people in their midst. And there's a certain like bootstraps mentality that Jesse Lee Peterson has that I understand exactly why. If you were a conservative, you'd be like, yeah, like I get it, like, you know what I mean? Like I like, at least with him I can understand. Like there's some people on the right that are just like, I don't know. It confuses me why they're watched. I get like why like a 70-year-old that like wants to deny that, I don't know, wants to deny that like any poor people deserve to be helped out at all by any government program would watch Jesse Lee Peterson just get like a dose of that and be like, oh, what I think isn't racist and what I think isn't classist, like I'm doing okay. Like
yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, he's got like, I don't know how many people actually watch each individual video, but like even like a couple of years ago when I went on debated him, Jesse Lee Peterson did have like a crazy YouTube subscriber count that was like 250,000 people or something.
It doesn't surprise me. I feel like there's a lot of I know a lot of older people that like talk and think like just like not like in a similar way. Like they kind of share the same like right wing like boomer memes. Like he kind of is a walking right wing boomer meme. Like
no. I mean, yeah, my my like not certainly. I'm sure I'm not the first or 50th or 10,000th person to make this analogy, but you know, he always like Peterson. You know, Jesse Lee Peterson always just reminds me like powerfully of Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks. In any case,
I'm gonna pull up super chats now.
Thank you so much, Yoda, for the super chat. Yes, goal is JP on the pod. Topic lobster human like, yeah. If Jordan Peterson wants to come on the pod and argue with me about lobsters and humans and what we can learn about lobsters and whether capitalism is justified, I am 1,000% there for it. If he doesn't want to come on the pod, if he wants me to come to Toronto for me to debate him and have like some IDW hack to moderate it, I'll still do that. Like I've devoted so much of my life to trying to debunk Peterson's argument that I think there's pretty much no circumstances under which I would turn down any version of that debate. But yeah, let's pull up the super chats that were sent during the debate tonight, because I don't want to stay on for too much longer because we have a friend over and we need to make dinner and all that stuff. But
damn, Ben, you got a play date going on.
Yeah, well, we this is actually kind of a novelty because we're all vaccinated now, so we can actually we actually have like a friend from New Jersey visiting us for a few days right now, and like we had like another person that we haven't seen in like months, visiting before. It's like I'm sort of slowly learning to remember what it's like to see people in person and not just on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I went to like the local bar one night at the end of the night, and like I still am not drinking for right now, but like I went and I like hung out and like saw some people, and it was a little bit awkward, but I'm like really gonna throw myself in the deep end on Friday, and I'm going to Austin for a few days. And I mean, I've never been to Austin, but like I'm gonna take a trip and do that, which is something that I never I never do. Like even before this, I mean, I'd go on trips like family vacations and stuff, but like I want to start like this summer, like really throwing myself into like going to more places that I haven't seen, because I feel like I haven't been to enough places.
Yeah. No, that's great. No, I've been saying this for months that like as soon as I can travel again, I'm gonna start traveling all the time as much as I can.
But like it's easy to say that though, and then the time comes.
Not actually do it.
Yeah. And so for me, I think making it really impulsive, like making an impulsive decision to like just go like somewhere that I've never been for a few days. I mean, while like my girlfriend's there and stuff, at least. For me, like it really feels like I'm gonna follow through on it. I mean, who knows if I really will after that? But
right.
All
right, let's go through the super chats for the debate.
All right, let me see. So, deserving of your own failings somehow, whether through not performing well enough or some form of original sin, lines up with Peterson's Christian sentiments instead of asking if winner and loser dynamics are flawed.
Yeah.
That was from the other night. This is from this one. Ben, please expand on your.
Forrest, do you have a way to actually pull it up on screen or no?
No. Oh wait, I could do it like this. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah. I could just share the channel monetization window. Sorry, I've been doing it that way and not by the chat. So like.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
All right. So the first one is, Ben, please expand on your statement. Money only has value because it is taxed. The oldest known writing on earth was accounting for tax in the form of collecting grain. Pretty sure food has value independent of being taxed.
Yeah, no, fair enough, right? I mean, I think that you can, it's possible to have taxes on things that would still have value if they weren't taxed. But my claim is that like government back, like the actual currency that's in our wallets right now, wouldn't have anything like the value that it has now if everybody didn't accept it, which everybody accepts it because the government taxes it. Like that's what, like it's not like there's a reason you can't go to McDonald's and, I don't know, maybe you will be able to soon, but for now, at least you can't go to McDonald's and pay in Bitcoin or Dogecoin or whatever. Everybody like with like the cryptocurrencies and stuff, it's just kind of a random hodgepodge who accepts what, but everybody accepts, fiat currency because, or, whether it's fiat or not, government-backed currency because it's what's being taxed. And even with the grain, right? I think once you establish a tax on grain, right, like it's going to have extra value because of that, and the actual U.S. currency has way more value because it's universally accepted, because it's taxed. Even apart from the fact that it's like minted by the government in the first place, but like if they declared tomorrow that they were only going to accept tax and whatever, that like you had to actually pay your taxes in bars of gold, right? The price of gold would go way up.
Yeah. So the way to steal without pain would be if the mark never noticed. Taxes cause pain, but nothing like mugging. Taxes may be theft, but if so is rent, and for that matter, wage labor and price gouging. And that's
yeah. So Brent I see has a few questions. Thank you for the super chats, brother. And yeah, let's actually just go through, because I think Brent's next one is at least I think he's got like a few that are all sort of continuing the same thought, right? So
so you're free to find a new landlord and employer. Okay, then you're free to find a new nation. What's that? Nowhere to go, not a real option. Curious. He says it's idiotic to point a gun at someone and order them to save a kid. Instead, save the kid yourself, and then if necessary, punish the coward who refused.
Yeah. Okay. So the last part is a slightly different thought, but as far as the first two, I think, So I mean, like if part of the reason why stealing is objectionable, and by the way, I do want to point out as a larger thing about the Huemer debate that he never really explained why, on his view, it's objectionable why it's objectionable to steal from public employees, right? Like I at least whatever, your mileage may vary. I never felt like I got a clear explanation of that. Like I got, he sort of said a few things that were all very sort of tentative and didn't quite fit together. But like, why, on his view, why is it wrong to steal from public employees? It certainly can't because the public employees have a right to this money that they're getting from taxation. That can't be it, right? And so why is that wrong from his perspective? And then it's the same question for why would it, like, even though like somebody who is a private sector taxpayer, they're the ones with the right to the money. The public employee doesn't have a right to the money, but he still thinks it would be wrong to steal it, right? Like in a vigilante way. Well, that's the same problem for him as it is for me to say why, even though I think that like public libraries are good, like it's just like sort of random vigilante theft, to fund like a private library would be okay. That's the same issue. And certainly like part of the reason why anybody should say that like vigilante theft is bad, even if the person doing the stealing like has a right to the money, is that it comes along with pain, that like it terrifies people to have their money stolen from them, and so that's certainly reduced if the mark never noticed, and it's certainly way reduced if it's like it's something that your entire life you've known that working involves having some of having like some of it deducted to pay for taxes and some of it withheld, and like that's just what work it is to you. Then it's certainly way reduced. So whether you think that captures all the reasons why theft is bad, it's certainly one reason that theft is bad. And then taxes may be theft, but if so is rent, and for that matter, wage labor and price gouging. Yeah. I mean, I think that there is like, I think that Brent is getting a really good point here, because if you say like, yeah, I really like that second one, right, where it says you're free to find a new landlord or employer, right? You need a place to live, you need someplace, so you need a source of income, right? But you say, oh well, it doesn't have to be this one. You're free to find a different one. Well, okay, you're free to find a different nation, or you're free to like, I mean, for that matter, we could even really sharpen it. Like if we're talking about income tax, not every state in the United States even has a state income tax. You're free to, to move from one that does to one that doesn't. The question is whether that's reasonable, right? Like whether like, like whether that's enough of a choice that you could, get up and move from state to state. And then like similarly, I think you could ask questions about like, oh, you're free to pick a different landlord or employer, especially because with a different landlord or employer, like unless you can find a co-op, and of course it's very hard to find jobs at co-ops because one, co-ops are way harder to start than regular capitalist businesses, and two, when people have jobs at co-ops, they never want to give them up. There's a lot less turnover, which tells you something by itself. But then like, okay, unless it's a co-op, any other landlord or employer would still be taking their cut in rent and profits, right? So you don't actually have a choice between, am I going to have to have some of my money taken away for rent and profits? You have a choice between, am I going to have this guy be the one taking it or this guy be the one taking it, which is a very different kind of choice. And one point, by the way, one thing that is like a slight regret about that debate, just because there's so much going on, and like we got, we would spend a lot of time talking about one specific point, and it was like hard to go back to stuff that hadn't been addressed for a while. But
yeah, and then some of them that he was making were so theoretical that like they were nonsensical to the point of like, arguing about these examples have no like real world like, like some of the analogies really were like disanalogies. Like they just didn't have and they didn't have any connection to anything going on in the real world. I felt like,
Yeah. And so the question, so anyway, a point that I meant to make, the whole open discussion, but there was never a good place to stick it in, is that I really wanted to make the Richard Wolff point about how like ridiculous it is to say that like that the capitalists are adding value. That's like they're adding as much value as they're getting in profits, because of course it is sometimes true that business owners do increase the value. They perform like managerial labor, or or maybe they just even directly work, like, owner of a medium-sized pizza shop might flip some, like take pizzas out of the oven himself. But
and they really hate that. That's why they have Marco Rubio out there trying to cut down
yeah, exactly. So that's all true, but that doesn't make like the profits they get like their wages for doing that, because the way that you can tell is that when there's somebody else who's doing that, right? When they get to the point where they can just hire a manager to take care of the day-to-day business, they don't pay that manager everything they're making in profits. So for example, it's not just wages for that. It's something that they can take because of their structural position of power, because they're the owner of the business. So what the point I really wanted to make was the one that Richard Wolff has made very effectively a few times, which is that sure, that you could say the capitalist is like providing the physical means of production, that the worker needs something from him, which is like the factory or whatever, the physical means of production, and the capitalist needs something from the worker, except that the capitalist didn't build the factory himself. The capitalist is a middleman between two groups of workers, the ones who built the factory and the ones who are then going to work in the factory, taking this totally socially unnecessary cut. And you can make the same point about landlords, that the landlord isn't providing anything. The landlord is, you could say the landlord's providing a building, but the landlord typically didn't build the building, right? The landlord is a middleman between the tenants and a bunch of construction workers who built the building in the first place. And of course, the really ridiculous thing is when people try to say, oh, the landlord is, he's providing all this maintenance work and stuff. It's like, okay, first of all, being a landlord and being a maintenance guy are two separate things. It's true that lots of like small scale landlords do their own maintenance stuff. But that's like saying that, like, if you own a small enough pizza shop, you might personally take the pizzas out of the oven. There's still a difference between being a pizza shop owner and actually working at a pizza shop. And of course, if the tenants just collectively own the building, they would actually have to spend, sure, they would hire somebody to do maintenance, but that doesn't mean that the rent is the equivalent of that, because rent is the equivalent of that plus everything else the landlord is living on.
Yeah. And if it's a company, that's, has like a bunch of real estate holdings, you're like basically just providing money to the company the same way you are to, any other business.
Exactly.
Because we think of landlords in like the singular a lot of times. And, as we get further into this dystopic future, like more and more of it is not, individuals, even it's like these large scale, like much like even more like hands off and just exploitative like real estate holdings companies.
Yeah, totally. I just pulled up this chat. Says taxes are annoying. You know what? I agree, but here's the thing. You know where taxes aren't annoying? To most people, at least. I mean, some people, because you might have complicated tax situations and it's still a headache. It might still be for me because I'm like stitching together a bunch of freelance gigs. But you know where taxes aren't annoying for most taxpayers? The Nordic countries, like those really advanced social democracies. Because in those advanced social democracies, the government will, if you're like a typical taxpayer, you're not like fighting about deductions and stuff. The government just does your taxes for you for free. In fact, in some of these countries, there was an article about this in Business Insider a few years ago. Literally doing your taxes takes like 10 seconds because like their equivalent of the IRS will send you a text message and all you have to do is reply yes. And that's the whole thing. The reason that we don't have that in the United States is that TurboTax and H&R Block and all of the parasites have effectively lobbied to prevent anything like that from happening.
They were also put in charge of large parts of the IRS's TurboTax, at least, was put in charge of during the Trump administration, large parts of the tax, like how taxes get actually I guess like levied and then filed. Like the IRS has put them in control of big parts of their apparatus, which you think is a complete conflict of interest, but apparently not in the corporate state.
Yeah, exactly. Antonio, thank you for the super chat, brother. Says congrats on the JBP praise, and he didn't even know that you read his interpretation of dreams. So for anybody who doesn't know what Antonio's talking about, unless there's another super chat, we'll stick around to answer that. But otherwise, we'll just end with this for tonight. and then like plug a couple things real quick and go. So when I was getting ready to do this conference in 2018 in Boise, Idaho, the conference in lieu of a debate, because Peterson had backed out of a discussion with Doug Lane, and so he got together with these new Symbolization Project people. I know Dave Jonathan, some other people in Idaho to do this conference. When I was preparing for my presentation at that, I, unlike Jordan Peterson, I believe in doing my reading, and so I took a look at some of what he'd written, including a book called Maps of Meaning, and what I concluded is that nobody has read Maps of Meaning. The reason I know nobody has read the Maps of Meaning is that there's something that comes pretty early in the book that is the funniest thing I've ever read, which is when he says,
I read this right before we did that Jordan Peterson episode. I know what you're about.
Yeah. So he's got this whole thing about how he used to be a socialist, and then like he saw the error of his ways. He's so vague about what kind of socialist he was that like he almost makes it sound like he was a revolutionary communist or something. I'm pretty sure he was just in the NDP, but whatever. And then he says that what cured him was reading George Orwell's Road to Whig and Peer, which is, by the way, hilarious if true, because Orwell was a committed socialist when he wrote that book. Like Orwell was like critical of a lot of the, whatever. I mean, Orwell's position was much like mine today, which is to say that Orwell was critical of a lot of the leftists in Britain at the time, but that didn't mean that he wasn't a socialist.
Yeah, no, it was. It's a general. I mean, like a lot of his work is just a general criticism of authoritarianism as a strain of like political.
Exactly. I mean, like you said, like in something he wrote way after Road to Whig and Peer, I think the Why I Write essay, Orwell said like everything that he'd written since 1930, whatever, he wrote for the sake of democratic socialism. So I think that Peterson was badly misreading Orwell, but whatever. But then he said he maintained his political interests enough that he was still very concerned about the possibility of nuclear war. And in fact, he said for like a year, he would have these intense, vivid dreams about nuclear war. Okay. And in the course of this, he says, well, this is what got him interested in psychology. This is what started him down the path to being like a clinical psychologist and psychology professor, that he was having these intense, vivid dreams over the course of this year about nuclear war, and he really wanted to understand them. And so, of course, he said one of the first things he read was Sigmund Freud's book, The Interpretation of Dreams. And he said he was interested, he learned stuff in the book, but, Freud wasn't for him. Right, this is how he ended up becoming interested in Jung instead, which is now he's a Jungian, because Freud wants to make everything about sex, and his dream had nothing to do with sex. His dreams were about politics. They were about the nuclear war happening. Hold that thought. In the one part of Maps of Meaning where he actually tells you one of these dreams that he was having in this period, it's about it starts out he's watching TV with his cousin, who he describes. Exact quote as, by the way, the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. This is his cousin he's talking about. Then something goes wrong with the TV. He goes into the basement. The big one goes off, right? The atomic bomb has gone off. Already, by the way, I'm sort of imagining Sigmund Freud sitting in the corner of the screen, like an ESPN commentator with like his smoke his pipe saying, right? With the hanging out with the hot cousin, a bomb goes off. This already seems kind of suggestive, but it gets better. He goes outside, and after in the post-atomic, chaos, all sorts of crazy things are going on. Dogs are walking around on their hind legs, which is an awesome image to keep in the back of your mind when Peterson talks about chaos, right? That's his subconscious idea of chaos. Dogs walking around on hind legs, and the dogs are trading cooked meat for canned food. Now, I don't know why in his dream the dogs would prefer the canned food to cooked meat, but whatever, let that pass. But so he makes the trade. He trades some canned food for some cooked meat. And then he realizes that the cooked meat he just ate was his hot cousin. Yeah, nothing sexual going on there. Freud obviously had nothing for him.
Oh, so, I didn't mean hot in terms of attractiveness. I meant hot in terms of they cooked her, and the meat itself was still warm from the oven, and you know.
Yeah. So yes, his crazy dream about lusting after and then literally eating his cousin after the bomb goes off. No sex. I don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, but I promise, Dr. Peterson, if you're watching this, I will not bring up your cousin dream if we do that debate.
Oh, I will. If it's not...
If he comes on the pod, we'll bring it up.
So, your cousin. Let's talk about that.
Oh, fair enough. That's awesome. Anyway, so just to really quickly talk a bit about the stuff coming up before we get off for the night. So on Friday we've got Philosophy Friday. It's going to be about David Hume's the standard of taste, about like whether some things are objectively, beautiful or not, like Jordan Peterson's cousin, and then that's going to be we will do more post-game analysis about the humor at some point than we actually managed to work in. A lot else turned out to be going on, but in any case, so Philosophy Friday with Jen is happening as usual on Friday, although we'll be in separate screens because I'm actually going to be in Los Angeles this weekend to visit my little brother. This is the first plane ticket I bought since getting vaccinated. It feels amazing to be traveling somewhere, as we were talking about, and also see. See mostly to hang out with my brother, although I will also see Nando and Megan Day and Danny Bestno while I'm there. But in any case, so that is what. So that's happening on Friday. For the same reason, though, because I'm going to be traveling on Sunday, we are not doing the usual Sunday night debate breakdown. We'll just do a clip, and then on on Monday, since I'm not going to be able to be in front of the computer for 3 hours like I normally do on Monday nights, we're not going to do like an episode, but we'll do like a stream for like an hour, like at the usual time, like at 8. Take some questions, talk to patrons, let you know if there are any updates on the Jordan Peterson situation. So and then we'll be back to normal on Wednesday when we're doing another movie live stream. That one is going to be about Total Recall.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one.
It is. Yeah, I actually watched Total Recall on. So I watched it to prepare for when I thought we were doing it like a week ago. I'll watch it again before we do it this week. But in any case, so lots of good stuff coming up. If you like the work that we do here, please do consider becoming a patron. And if I don't know why you wouldn't. I'm the best of the left. We heard it from a source of unimpeachable authority. And, every time I
hear Jordan, like every time someone says his full name, I think of the Dr. Peterson. It's like, wake up, Dr. Peterson. We need you to wake up.
That is that's I love that. I love that video so much. What are those called? Amon Animations? Is that what?
Yeah, Amon Animations.
Yeah. So anyway, and yes, read the book, and once you read it, take pictures of the pages about Jordan Peterson and tweet with Jordan Peterson. No comment, but
hot cousin, beef girl, just all Jordan Peterson's family members.
Yeah, exactly. In any case, free Palestine for sure, and do check out, if you haven't seen the discussion we did with Nora Barrows-Friedman about that on Monday. We actually put that out as a separate video last night. So I was really happy about how that came out, and we are definitely going to do more content on that coming up. And also, by the way, I should say, slightly different, but just in terms of the foreign policy stuff, I also want to do more Cuba content that I feel, as we've discussed a little bit before, I think that people aren't talking nearly enough about how bad Biden's Cuba policy is, and how
at a time when the future of Cuba is really kind of at a crossroads. I think. I mean, the Castros are out of power for the first time in half a century.
Yeah, and they have been, and again, I mean, I think you can. This is one of those situations where you can and should hold multiple thoughts in your head, because it can be both true that there's plenty about Cuba to criticize from a democratic socialist point of view, and also that those features didn't arise in a vacuum and that U.S. policies didn't play a role in that process, or that it isn't incredibly impressive that during several decades of this crippling embargo. And I know people will say all kinds of bullshit about how, it's okay, the embargo doesn't really matter that much because Canada and Europe trade with them. It matters a lot. There's a lot of medical equipment, for example, you can't get if you're under embargo from the United States because we produce so much of it. So under these circumstances, the fact that they were able to, create a 99% literacy rate, bring about the highest doctor-patient ratio in the world, send planes to Angola and help bring about the downfall of apartheid in South Africa, that they've sent doctors all around the world for decades, and that they've had this deeply impressive COVID response. Again, compare the American colony in Puerto Rico to Cuba in terms of their COVID responses, and there's just no there's no comparison. And so I think that this is stuff I want to talk about more, and I specifically want to talk more about how they've actually developed. Somebody brought up they developed their own COVID vaccine. They've actually developed 2 COVID vaccines that are currently in the last stages of testing, and the good thing too with Cuba developing it, that they're going to share it with the rest of the world. So I think that this, and I think that also whatever you think of the sort of balances of positive and negative aspects of Cuban society, and again, I want to have an adult conversation about this and admit that there are both positives and negatives, and there are things that should be criticized, but whatever you think about that, the worst, most authoritarian things about Cuba don't hold a candle to all kinds of governments that the U.S. has no problem trading with and having diplomatic relationships with, and even arming.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they're gonna, that they're definitely gonna share it with the rest of the world is a bottom line of why it's such a crucial moment in Cuba's development, I guess, right now, because not even pretending that maybe the fact that the neoliberalization of Cuba, people actually are planning it behind the scenes, taking that factor out, there's going to be incredible incentives to do more business with the U.S. and to have our embargo lifted in some ways, but those incentives are going to be completely opposite to the good things that they do for the rest of the world. So moving away from the rest of the world and moving towards the U.S., if that did happen, is going to be something incredibly incentivized, and it's important to have someone that can keep the system going. Like the way it is, or at least not the way it is necessarily, but
there are parts of it that are really good that should absolutely
it has to be really strong leadership, I think, to resist that turn to neoliberalism that is definitely going to be highly coerced by the Biden administration.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just horrifying that in the middle of everything we've been talking about, Biden not only he hasn't even gone back to the diplomatic opening that Obama was doing with Cuba. In fact, he hasn't even taken Cuba off the state sponsors of terrorism list, which is fucking ridiculous, because essentially the excuse for that was that Cuba doesn't have extradition treaties with the United States and Colombia, but that's like if you're going to say that that's a good enough reason to count you as a sponsor of terrorism, I mean that's ridiculous. Like you could like for one thing, that should go both ways, right? In fact, it should definitely go both ways, because look at the people walking around free in Miami right now who have committed terrorist acts in Cuba, you know, which are, I think you can make a much better state sponsorship claim. So anyway, so I, you know, that's something we need to talk about more. We need to talk more about Palestine. You know, I want to talk a little bit about Peru at some point. There's been a very stupid controversy about the DSA doing something good. I'll give them credit for this, and sending some observers. Peru is like solidarity with like the leftist candidate there, and there are people who are like all upset about that because they've got this, that, and the other criticism of like Castillo, the leftist candidate in Peru, which you know, I think that like, you know, some of it's that like, you know, the guy's not, you know, socially progressive enough, but it's also like, okay, by Peruvian standards or by like, you know, DSA standards.
Yeah.
Those are very different standards. Like which curve we're grading him on. But anyway, so I want to talk about all those things. We will talk about all of those things. We will for sure talk about Iran. But right now I gotta go. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you in particular to those of you sent super chats. Everybody go tweet at Jordan Peterson. Left is best.